Hello everyone, Xeno What If here. Bring in Season 2 Part 12 of What If the Transformers Crash Landed in Code Geass. Link in the description of the fanfiction of this What If. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Ghosts. Within the hidden facility that served as the headquarters of the Geass Order, Shockwave had activated a ground bridge portal and watched as a large, dark, metallic figure with glowing red eyes stepped into the portal, which shut down immediately. Transportation successful. Project Nemesis has been transported toward to the planet's equator to retrieve the designated relic. Shockwave recorded on his logs before accessing the console again to open yet another ground bridge portal. Coordinates set for the abandoned settlement known as Chernobyl. Dark Knights, assemble to me. Shockwave turned around to see his hand-select team that would accompany him to the site. The Dark Mordred, piloted by Anya, stood alongside the Land, Order, Power, Refrain, Headmaster units that were controlled by Lucretia, Sancha, Dalk, and the Cybernetic Mel respectively. And standing at the lead was the Dark Queen itself. We are embarking on to retrieve the relic at Chernobyl. Do not hesitate to destroy everything that stands in the way of our objective. Affirmative. Anya and all the headmasters replied as the team of 7 walked into the portal. Chernobyl, an abandoned city that once housed a nuclear reactor in the EU, now nothing more than a ghost town. White ash blanketed the entire ground and most of the ruined buildings. One could say it looked like the aftermath of a volcanic eruption, but the damage didn't look as bad as one. But that was not the case. No, what had happened was something far worse than any volcanic eruption. Suddenly, the ash on the ground was picked up as, probably for the first time in decades, there was a disturbance in the abandoned city. A ground bridge portal opened up, and the first to step out was the massive Autobot known as Grimlock, with Chera's Pink Akatsuki and Alice's Pegasus. We have arrived, Sarah reported, triangulating your position and receiving visual feed from your nightmares. Fix-It responded over the comms. Oh my, this city it's a ghost town, Rakshata said. That's putting it mildly. Alice commented, glancing around from her nightmare's cockpit with an uncomfortable expression. Where's the relic? Grimlock questioned. Not far from your location. Fix-It answered. Proceed northward but be cautious. We do not know what Decepticons you'll be facing. I don't care who it is. They'll be torn to pieces if they get in my way. Grimlock stated as he walked forward with the rest of Zeta Team right behind him. As they made their way through the streets of the ruined city, Alice and Sarah found themselves glancing around at what had become of Chernobyl. From the way the city was structured, it looked as if it could have been a well-populated city, probably having a population near 1 million. But, the fact that nobody besides them was there was more than a little eerie. Even the air itself seemed still. The only sounds that were made were the hovering of the 2 nightmares and the enormous stomps of Grimlock. Sarah had seen the aftermaths of many battles and more than her fair share of ruined cities during her unnaturally long life, but even she couldn't help but feel some form of pity for the people that used to live here. It looked like they had lost everything. Even Alice had a similar feeling herself, especially when she glanced in one direction and saw an abandoned playground complete with slides, seesaws, rocking horses, and even a merry-go-round. That really made her feel uncomfortable and sympathetic at the same time. Grimlock, on the other hand, didn't really care all that much. Sure, so many people losing their homes like this was upsetting, but crying about it wasn't going to change anything. He had a job to do, and he was going to get it done. And if the Decepticons really were here, then this city may not be standing for too much longer, and he would likely be responsible for much of the damage. Meanwhile, back on Horai Island, Fix-It and Receptor watched everything that was going on with Zeta Team from their own station within the Ark. This city, why was it abandoned? Was there an attack? Fix-It asked. No, officially an accident. Rakshata began to explain, holding her pipe in her hand. While Britannia was making its own scientific advancements and had access to most sakuradite deposits on the planet, the EU tried to keep up using nuclear power as an alternative fuel source. That sounds incredibly unsafe. Fix-It stated. While it is true that nuclear power holds a great advantage in energy output and even efficiency if used right, there is also a greater risk in the fact that an accident could cause greater collateral damage. True, but given how Britannia wanted to dominate everything, Europia was desperate enough to find a way to properly fight back, and they just felt it was worth the risk. Rakshata continued. Chernobyl was dedicated to the study of nuclear power. I visited the city once myself and it was quite lively, while the work was rather diligent. They knew exactly what they were dealing with and made all the preparations and fail-safes necessary in order to prevent any kind of accident from occurring. Still seems rather risky to house a populated city within the range of such a potentially devastating power. Fixit said. True, but the politics felt it was best because such a city would make it easier to hide a potential secret weapon that could give them a leg up over the Britannians. Rakshata put in. So, what happened? Fixit asked. You said it was an accident. Officially. Rakshata replied as a serious look formed on her face. I wasn't there when it occurred, but the records said that it was due to a failure in the coolant system, as well as cheaper use of control rods. The reactor erupted and destroyed much of the facility. The radiation spread through the surrounding city even as the populace was evacuated. Most of the casualties came from the workers in the facility, several died from the accident itself, others from severe radiation poisoning, same with several of the citizens. It's a particularly nasty way to go. But, when you say, officially, do you mean there is more to it? Fixit asked again. While I do not have any proof to confirm it, one of the bodies recovered from the wreckage of the facility was of Britannian origin. Rakshata revealed, catching Fixit's attention. And upon investigating, it was revealed the person in question had history within the military. Sabotage then, Fixit assumed. It's not been confirmed, but I would not be surprised if that were the case. She answered. The politicians didn't allow the investigation to continue any further because Britannia could have used it as an excuse to invade, claiming the EU was preparing weapons of mass destruction. But of course, with Britannia gone, it really doesn't matter at this point. I see. Fixit looked down as he glanced again at the footage of the abandoned city. It's a pity, it seemed like such a lively city. It was, but now it won't be habitable again for at least another 20,000 years. She said, feeling some form of remorse. Deciding to change the subject, Fixit looked at the coordinates for which Zeta Team would find the relic. It would seem they are nearing the relic. It is only, oh my. What is it? The coordinates for the relic they seek. Fixit brought it up on the main screen, a map of the entire city with a pulsating dot at a specific area. It appears to be at the ruined facility. Under the wreckage of the failed reactor, Rakshata noted. Well, that certainly makes things interesting. The trio of Zeta Team arrived at the top of a small incline where the ruins of the Chernobyl reactor stood before them. Out of everything in the city, what was left of this facility seemed the most devastated as a large section of it had been completely blown off. A word of advisement, Zeta Team. Rakshata chimed in. The radiation levels in the old reactor are the highest in the area, obviously. So I would recommend that our lovely ladies do not leave their nightmares. Your units should be sealed enough to keep you safe from any radiation poisoning, but be sure to stay safe. Though our little immortal witch may make it out unscathed, death by radiation poisoning is an ordeal I certainly wouldn't want to go through. Acknowledged. Sarah responded. Understood. Alice replied. Even with whatever physical enhancements that had been made to her, she was doubtful that she was immune to radiation. Let's get this over with, Grimlock said as they proceeded further up the hill. But they did not get very far before Fixit alerted them. Alert! We have enemy signals incoming. The mini-con revealed. 1 Decepticon, 1 signal of Dark Energon, and 5 enemy units. Here comes the welcoming committee. Sarah commented. From the gloomy clouds, a bright red light shined beneath it before the clouds were blown away by a powerful blast from a hadron cannon. Grimlock immediately rushed to the front and brandished his shield to deflect the blasts. When the attack subsided, the Dark Mordred descended from the skies with order, land, power, and refrained flanking it on all sides, and the Dark Queen at the head of it all. It's them, Alice muttered, her eyes shaking as she recognized the units powered by her former teammates. A dark purple Cybertronian tank quickly rolled up from underneath them before it transformed to reveal the Decepticon scientist who was pulling at all their strings. Grimlock. Shockwave acknowledged. The likelihood of our encounter one another on the same site was at least 11%, unlikely, but still possible. Shockwave, Grimlock growled, his optics glowing bright red before he brandished his sword along with his shield. You're going to lose more than your arm when I'm done with you. Unlikely. Shockwave then began to relay instructions. Order, Power, Land, engage Grimlock according to Formation D6. Dark Mordred, Dark Queen, engage the immortal known as CC, capture her if you can. Refrain, with me as we deal with our lost asset, Speed. With that command, all 6 units flew forward and began to engage Zeta Team. Grimlock wasted no time charging forward, gunning straight for Shockwave. However, Power flew at high speeds before bringing its arms together and slammed them into Grimlock like a battering ram. This provided enough force to halt Grimlock's advance and knock him back slightly. Order and Land then began to encircle around him, with Land shooting rapid-fire energon blasts from its Gatling guns while Order slashed rapidly at Grimlock's sides, though this only served to fuel the Dinobot's fury. Sarah flew her pink Akatsuki upward with the Dark Queen and Dark Mordred in pursuit. The Dark Queen brandished its massive blade and swung it down toward Chera's Nightmare, but she quickly drew her Nightmare's katana to parry its strike, though the force did knock it back somewhat. She then gave a gasp as the Dark Mordred appeared behind her and fired its hadron cannons again, but Sarah was able to fly higher and avoid the blasts. Alice gave a yell as she flew directly toward Shockwave, but Refrain blocked her path, brandishing its scythe. With the Pegasus quickly zoomed backwards slightly to avoid the scythe's strike, but Alice activated a pair of arm blades from her units and went on the attack, slicing at Refrain, but it blocked every one of her strikes. She then was forced on the defensive as Shockwave fired his massive cannon at her. Grimlock used his shield to protect himself from the onslaught of Land's Gatling guns and tried to press forward and swing his massive blade down toward her, but Power came in from behind and slammed one of its armored arms onto Grimlock's head to disorient him and allow Order to fly forward and slice at his chest. Though she couldn't quite cut through his armor, Order's attack was able to knock him back, which Power took advantage of as she hovered just barely off the ground and flew in to strike at Grimlock's legs, tripping him up and knocking him flat on his back. Taking advantage of his downed position, Land concentrated rapid-fire energon blasts on his central chest area in order to keep him pinned and give Order a chance to try and strike at his neck area with her swords. However, Grimlock was still able to reach up with his enormous hand and grab Order before throwing her at Land, causing them to crash and roll across the ground. Power came in and tried to thrust both her units' armored arms at him, but Grimlock caught them both in his own and lifted her up with his superior strength before slamming her onto the ground and throwing her away. Power was able to stabilize herself somewhat as she, Order, and Land regrouped. Within each of the head units of the 3 headmasters, the human females inside couldn't help but look with worry as they saw Grimlock stomp his way over to them. His hulking figure was imposing enough, but his eyes, the glowing red in his optics, showed nothing but an uncontrollable rage that was slowly boiling its up toward the surface, along with the absolute intent to kill them where they stood. Well, this is certainly a unique confrontation, Sarah thought to herself as she flew around the hadron blast of the Dark Mordred and zoomed right at her, firing her guns and missiles as Anya pulled up her unit's shields to protect herself. The Dark Mordred then lowered itself and allowed the Dark Queen to go on the offensive and swing its blade at the pink Akatsuki. Both swords clashed as Sarah struggled against her enemy, the ghost of Marianne fighting alongside her zombified corpse. I can only imagine Charles tossing and turning in his grave at this. She pulled back to gain some distance. Of course, Marianne herself is probably throwing a tantrum like the brat she is. Sarah continued to think. I wouldn't be surprised if she wanted to find a way to regain control of her old body and turn it on Megatron, but since the Dark Queen is fueled by dark energon, Megatron would easily take control of her, and I think she knows it. She's a brat, but Marianne isn't stupid. At least not that stupid. Sarah then fired her Nightmare's missiles, launching a volley in an attempt to separate her 2 units before going straight for the Dark Queen, clashing their swords once again as Sarah fired her Slash Harkins, which chinned off some of its metal. If I can at least kill this monstrosity, it should cause Lelouch a bit of relief. Her thoughts wavered slightly. He'll have to find out soon though, if only so we can find a way to properly help Anya. Poor girl doesn't deserve this. Speaking of Anya, her Dark Mordred appeared behind her as the Dark Queen pulled away. Anya's unit fired multiple missiles from all over its wrists, chest, hips, and legs, causing Sarah to turn around and fire her own machine guns from her pink Akatsuki's wrist to intercept most of them, though the resulting explosion did push her back slightly. Alice moved her Pegasus as fast as she could, slashing rapidly at a speed that was far superior than even the likes of the Lancelot or the Gurren, and yet Refrain was able to block all her strikes, receiving no damage whatsoever. The fact that she hadn't even landed a single scratch on him only grated on her frustration as she tried to quickly fly around and strike from behind, but Refrain was able to counter by using the staff of his scythe to block the Pegasus blades before slicing upward with the scythe blade, creating a large scratch across the Pegasus' chest, right before it was shot in the back and knocked down by Shockwave's cannon. Your unit appears to be modified, but it still follows the same patterns and principles as before. Your tactics have not changed, Shockwave told Alice, earning a glare from her. You should already know that Refrain's ability to read his enemy's thoughts allows him to predict all your moves. I further modified him to enable him to process information faster than any human or even natural Cybertronian. Your speed cannot do much if your enemy knows every intent you'll make. Shockwave aimed his cannon at the Pegasus' head. You'll be returning to me now. Over my dead body. Alice pulled on a lever, causing the Pegasus to fly straight backwards and avoid Shockwave's blast before zooming forward. The Pegasus drew its blades once more and went on the attack, but Refrain blocked one blade with its scythe, as Alice intended, and moved quickly enough to spin via their clashed blades to deal a spinning quick to Shockwave's face, landing an attack to knock him back. This however proved to be a mistake as Refrain was able to fly upwards, catching the Pegasus with its left arm and push it upwards, sending it flying up before Refrain flew up to reach it and deliver another scythe strike to send Alice crashing back to the ground. Meanwhile, Grimlock swung his massive blade at all three headmasters as they flew around him in all directions. He swung with such ferocity and speed that Order, Power, and Land dared not make a move to attack. One hit from that huge broadsword could cleave each of their units in half, and that was the best-case scenario. Of course, the fact that Grimlock was unable to hit any of them made it increasingly frustrating for the Dinobot. His already boiling anger was fuming even more. Deciding to go for hit-and-run attacks, Order relayed her orders to Land and Power through a digital interface that connected the other headmaster units together. Land attacked first, concentrating her Gatling blasters on Grimlock's legs to trip him up, allowing Order to come in from behind and strike him in the back, sending him tumbling toward the incoming power that knocked him up into the ground. If we strike him like this, hit and run, we may have a chance. Order thought to herself before resuming their attack pattern. One would strike him in the side, move away, and another would come in from Grimlock's blind spot for the same kind of attack, and they'd repeat it. Grimlock found himself so stuck in their attacks, unable to counter. His anger boiled more and more, until finally, he could no longer contain it. Enough. Grimlock slammed his fists onto the ground, creating a big enough shockwave that pushed the three headmasters back slightly. He then transformed into his massive T-Rex form and gave a loud roar that would echo throughout the entire dead city, catching the attention of everyone else. Oh no, Sarah dreaded, knowing that Grimlock's rage-induced transformation was almost completely uncontrollable. Grimlock quickly swung his tail at all three headmasters, striking them with enough force to send them crashing and skidding across the ground. He gunned straight for Power first, ready to bite down onto her. But she quickly used her unit's arms to keep his upper jaw open and prevented it from closing on her. It took all her nightmare's strength to keep it from closing, and even then it was a struggle. However, she gave a gasp as she saw the flames quickly building up from below his threat. Power quickly tried to pull out, but was still struck by Grimlock's plasma breath, which did scorch the front of her unit quite a bit. The raw force from his attack sent Power flying. Land attacked next, concentrating all her Gatling's firepower directly into Grimlock's Tyrannosaurus face, but he rushed her and slammed his head into her unit to press it hard into the ground. Order flew in next and struck her blades at Grimlock's throat, slightly disorienting him before kicking him in the face. But he quickly bit down to rip off her nightmare's right leg and then quickly swiped his tail to knock her to the ground. Alice could only look in shock and even fear at how quickly her old team was being beaten back. Sancha, Dalk, Lucretia, her pupils shrunk in terror as she saw Grimlock's T-Rex mode loom over the Order unit. Inside, Lucretia could only look in absolute terror as the out-of-control Grimlock was ready to incinerate her with his plasma breath. But right before he could unleash it, the Pegasus zoomed in as fast as it could move and pulled the Order unit out of the way, sparing Lucretia from the inferno that would have consumed her and her whole unit. Grimlock, stop. Alice exclaimed, tears flowing in her eyes. Please. Don't. They don't want to do this. It's not their fault. Grimlock seemed incapable of listening to reason as he roared at her and charged at her in his T-Rex mode, trying to bite at her, but she moved out of the way quickly enough and barely had time to dodge his tail strike that barely grazed her front. Not good. Sarah immediately disengaged from her fight against the Dark Mordred and Dark Queen, though the later pursued her, something Sarah was counting on. As she closed in on Grimlock, she fired her Akatsuki's machine gun to get his attention. The out-of-control Dinobot turned to her and unleashed his plasma breath at her, but Sarah was able to move her nightmare out of the way and allow it to strike the pursuing Dark Queen. Though the enemy unit was far enough away to avoid any serious damage, the force of the impact still sent the Dark Queen flying and crashing into a nearby building at the bottom of the hill. With Grimlock briefly distracted, it allowed Sarah the chance to fly in from behind and land on his back. This is really indirect contact, but we have to stop him. Sarah then began to channel her own power, her hair flowing up slightly as the Geass emblem on her forehead began to glow. Time to go to sleep, Grimlock. In that instant, Grimlock froze as he saw all sorts of visions flash through his optics. At first, he saw a tunnel of colors, like he was falling through some kind of vortex, though it was hard to see anything past the blurry of red in front of him, almost as if his rage was preventing him from seeing clearly. But in a flash of white light, countless memories began to flood through Grimlock's mind all at once. He saw his days as a gladiator in the pits of Kaun, then the early days of the war and joining the Autobots, such as his frequent disagreements with Optimus. But he later saw the formation of his own unit, the Lightning Strike Coalition, where he had found a team and friends to truly care for and look after. Then he saw swarms of mechanical insects ambush him and his team in the Sea of Rust, before he found himself strapped to Shockwave's laboratory table, and fully conscious as the Decepticon scientist began to cut him open and pick him apart from the inside. He remembered feeling everything as he was torn apart and welded back together with no regard for his own well-being. And even more furious, was that he even saw his own teammates endure the same thing. His own pain he could take, but to have his comrades and friends go through the same kind of torture. That was unacceptable. He felt his rage build up again, but it clashed with the rage he was currently feeling. One would expect the two forces of anger to merge together and become unstoppable, but that didn't happen. They both pressed against one another, almost like backfire. The two flames ended up consuming the other and snuffing each other out in that one instant. Grimlock's rampage came to a sudden stop. Just as Sarah detached her nightmare from him, Grimlock lost his T-Rex form and turned back to normal, slumping to the ground in exhaustion. Alice, we have to get him out of here. Sarah told her teammate. We need to retreat and regroup. All right, Alice nodded. She paid one final glance towards her old team before flying up to meet with Sarah as both their nightmares picked up Grimlock by his arms and dragged him away as quickly as they could. Refrain and the Dark Queen were ready to give pursuit. No. Do not follow. Shockwave ordered. Top priority, secure the Yakin relic. Both units landed close to him in response, following the orders of their puppeteer-like robots. The Dark Mordred landed near the recovering headmasters. Is everyone present and accounted for? The young pilot asked. Yes, we're all in one piece. Dalk answered. Status report. Shockwave ordered as he approached the group. Headmaster units power and land received 27% and 29% damage respectively but remain functional. Sancha reported. But the order unit has lost its right leg and has received 48% damage. Is your unit still functional? Shockwave questioned. Yes, though not as effective as the others. Sancha answered. Then we resume the mission. Shockwave stated. Why not pursue the enemy? Sancha asked. Their biggest weapon seems indisposed. We can strike now and be done with them. Negative. Shockwave shook his head. Grimlock is not so easily disposed of. He has survived far greater threats than anything we currently have at our disposal. Perhaps this relic we seek is capable of destroying him, all the more reason to obtain it. If it is not, then we must retrieve it immodestly and return to base. Acquisition of the relic takes priority. Acknowledged. Anya, Sancha, Dalk, and Lucretia all said as they followed Shockwave into the partially destroyed facility with Refrain and the Dark Queen beside them. Grimlock groaned audibly as he regained his senses. The first thing he tries to do is see what kind of environment he was in. He was still in Chernobyl, but he was now inside a partially destroyed building that had one of its walls broken down, which was presumably likely used as a makeshift door to bring him in for cover. He also noticed the two nightmares standing just outside, guarding him. "Someone's awake," Sarah said, turning her nightmare to face him as Grimlock rubbed his head. "Have a nice nap." Suddenly, Grimlock rushed out through the broken building, collapsing it entirely as he busted through its walls to grab the pink Akatsuki and pin it onto the building across from him. "Hey, put her down," Alice exclaimed, reading her Pegasus to fight him, but Grimlock wasn't focused on her at the moment. "What did you do to me?" Grimlock shouted toward Sarah. "I had to shock you out of it. You were out of control." The immortal shouted back from inside her nightmare. "You're smart enough to know when you transform and full of rage like that, you're a threat to everyone around you, including your allies." Grimlock let her go, but he was still far from pleased as he leaned in close to the Akatsuki's face, confident she could see him from inside. "Never do that again. You were going to slaughter them," Alice exclaimed. "She had no choice. I would have done that to you myself if I had that power." The Dinobot finally turned around to face her. "I remember what you did. Why did you protect them? They're the enemy. More of Shockwave's experiments. Just like you." Alice glared at him. "I know your story, Grimlock. Shockwave captured you and your team and made you into what you are. You hate him for it. So much so you wanna rip him to pieces the very second you see his one eye. You don't know what you're talking about." Grimlock loomed dangerously over her. "My team and I were taken apart. Piece by piece. And then stitched back together like dolls. I felt every single second of it. I saw him do that to my team. He made me into a monster." The cockpit of the Pegasus opened up as Alice stood up fully, to reveal her face. It was flushed red with rage as tears poured down from her eyes. "That's exactly what happened to me," she shouted, staring Grimlock straight into his red optics. "Alice." Sarah was more than a little shocked to see her exit her nightmare, potentially exposing herself to some of the lingering radiation, but also because she was challenging Grimlock right to his face, without any means to defend herself. Grimlock said nothing when Alice screamed at him. He kept his eyes on her, but remained silent, almost as if he was inviting her to speak up. "When I was a child, my family, my own little sister, who was confined to a wheelchair, they all died in a fire," Alice began, her voice choking up as so many emotions flowed out all at once. "I probably should have died too, but, somehow he found me, VV. He took me, to his precious Geass order, and they had me strapped down to a table almost every day, drugged me, experimented on me, tried to make me into a killer. A soldier for them. And it wasn't just me, countless other kids, some even born in the Geass order, they went through the same thing." She remembered it all vividly. Nearly every day, she and so many other young boys and girls were subjected to experimentation with Geass, trying to enhance their abilities and make them into their own personal army. And on the days where she wasn't being experimented on, she was trained like how one would train an adult soldier, only even more intense. And the one who supervised it all was none other than VV. From the first moment she saw his smirking face, she knew what hate was. Those people, in those nightmares, Sancha, Dalk, Lucretia, they were there with me too, Alice continued, speaking in a more hushed and sorrowful tone. They were with me every day, through the pain and torture, they at least made it bearable, because we had each other. We bonded, they're like my family, even when Shockwave took over, and made things worse, they were still there. They don't serve him willingly, I didn't either, they're victims, just like you." She looked to him with a pleading expression as her eyes continued to water. "Please, don't kill them. Help me, save them, like how your side saved me." Sarah looked to the crying girl in utter sympathy. During her time in the Geass Order, she had indeed seen Charles and Vivi create an army of child soldiers to do their bidding, so that when they grew up and were old enough, they'd be a near unstoppable army. Hers and Vivi's cells were extracted for those experiments, to see if their regeneration and immortality could enhance their abilities. It seems they still had some of her cells when they experimented on Alice and her friends. And she wasn't the only one who felt that way. For one of the very few times in his life, Grimlock actually felt genuine pity. He didn't sympathize with that many other individuals, even among his fellow Autobots outside his team, with just a few exceptions. But this girl, he knew what she was going through. To have everything taken from you and be helpless as a monster tortures you and makes you into their own personal lab rat. It was a fate he would not wish upon anyone. But more than anything, he knew what it was like to want to save those closest to you. I'm sorry. Sarah and Alice both had to double-take to make sure they heard right. Did Grimlock just apologize? In the short time they've met him, Grimlock always gave the impression of a brute that didn't care much for others. But to actually hear him apologize was almost akin to a lion deciding to become a vegetarian. No one should have to go through what you did. What we did, Grimlock said. Those friends of yours, they're important to you, aren't they? More than anything else, Alice confirmed. Except maybe, for her. Aside from her friends, she knew of one other person who seemed just as precious. The first person she met and befriended in the Black Knight Autobot Alliance. The same girl who had nothing but pure goodness in her lavender eyes and genuine smile. I know what that's like. Grimlock continued. Snarl, swoop. Sludge, slug, they're my men. My brothers. We fought and bled together through the entire war. They were also experimented on by Shockwave, just as me. Turned into this. Grimlock gestured to himself for emphasis. I haven't seen them since I came here, when Shockwave's tower exploded on Cybertron, years ago. I have no idea where they are now, or if they're even alive. He looked down in grief, causing Alice to look at him with sympathy. But, I know they're some of the toughest Autobots out there. There's a reason my team has lasted long as we did. And you. He gave a slight chuckle. You and your friends endured all that kind of stuff for years, and you were young, but look at you. You came out of it. You're stronger now for it. And you don't give up on those you care about. On your team. I respect that. Alice wiped the tears from her eyes with her arm as she smiled at him. Respect, from probably the biggest bot on the planet. Guess I did something right. We got a job to do. Grimlock said. I know, get the relic. Not just that. He interrupted Alice. I'm not the nicest Autobot, but I am an Autobot. If I didn't care about the weak, I'd have the other side's emblem on my chest. He gestured to his Autobot emblem. They think they're strong just because they pick on the weak, but that makes them the weakest of all. Megatron, Shockwave, even that VV, they're weak. They're cowards. But you're strong. Your friends are strong. They don't deserve to be on Shockwave's leash, so I'll help you free them. Alice did not expect him to say those words. Was Grimlock really offering to help free her friends? Why you mean it? Yes, he confirmed. She couldn't quite explain it, but the way this giant looked down at her, the way he was speaking to her, it was almost as if he was speaking to her as an equal. No, he was speaking as her equal. In that one moment, despite being physically smaller than him, she felt as big and as tall as he was. Before she knew it, tears of joy were falling down her eyes as she tried to rub them out. Thank you, Grimlock. Perhaps we can accomplish both goals. Sarah spoke up. Maybe there's a way to free them and get the relic. What do you have in mind? Grimlock asked. We let Shockwave and the others dig it up, and if it's a weapon, we use it against him. Sarah explained. If not, you go straight for Shockwave. You can have your revenge and rip him to pieces. If he's gone, Alice's friends won't have to serve him any longer. That's too simple. He'll see it coming a mile away. Grimlock shook his head. What if he doesn't see it? Rakshata chimed in. Wah, when did you patch in? Alice questioned. We've always been in contact. Remember? Rakshata asked rhetorically. Did you hear our entire conversation? The youngest girl exclaimed, her face blushing with embarrassment. Yes, very emotionally moving by the way. The female scientist said on the other side of the link. But I believe we may have found a way to catch Shockwave off guard. Fix-It said. The ground underneath Chernobyl is lined with tunnels, rather large ones. Perhaps a means to move the uranium and other radioactive materials to and from the reactor undetected. They lead straight to the facility. And if the relic is underground, we can launch a surprise attack and maybe surprise him. Sarah followed along. Still rather simple though, Grimlock said. There is a chance Shockwave may have already figured out the same thing. Megatron's made him his top scientist for a reason. But it may be our only chance. Alice put in. And besides, what's battle without taking a few risks, right? She said to the Dinobot with a smirk. Grimlock chuckled in response. Right. Then it seems we have a plan. Sarah said. Rakshata, fix it, where are those tunnels? Meanwhile, Shockwave and his team of Dark Knight units had already arrived in whatever was left of the reactor. It didn't take long for them to start digging. In fact, much of the reactor was built into the ground itself, and when the accident had occurred, the resulting explosion had already created a large enough crater that had given them plenty of room to work. The relic they were searching for was deeper underground. Shockwave assumed the reactor was built over it. Whether the relic itself was responsible for the accident here was unlikely and irrelevant. Using controlled blasts from all their long-ranged weapons and heavy artillery, the Dark Knight units dug deeper and deeper underground. The Dark Mordred's hadron cannons appeared to be digging the deepest. If this relic happens to be a weapon, is there any chance we can use it against Shockwave? Anya asked Marianne via their telepathic connection. Not without exposing our whole plan. Marianne replied. And we can't just destroy it either for that same reason. Perhaps we can give it to the Black Knights and the Autobots, make it look like we were fighting over it. Anya asked. I doubt Shockwave is easily fooled. He's not like VV, he's far more perceptive. It's taken all this careful maneuvering just to remain undetected from him. Marianne said. If it weren't for the fact that Shockwave had turned Mao into a machine meant solely for combat rather than espionage, he would have already found us out. Even if I died, you still would have escaped via your own Geass, just like how you first got to me. Remember, Anya reminded in a somewhat spiteful manner, which Marianne couldn't fault her for. Shockwave wouldn't kill you for that very reason. The ghost inside her responded. He would have turned his Geass cancellers on us and erase me from your mind, and then probably either kill you or turn you into a cyborg. Anya made no response, but the cold shoulder was still clear. Listen, Anya, you want to get out of this. You want to stop Shockwave and everything the Geass Order has been doing. Then we need to work together on this. Marianne told her. Ironic, isn't it? That was everything that you, Charles, and VV worked so hard to create. Now that it's all turned against you, you are doing everything you can to destroy it all. Anya said. If you think for 1 minute that it's going to redeem you, you're wrong. I may not have known Lelouch or Nunnally all that well, which is more or less thanks to you too, but I know they won't forgive you either. There was silence for a moment, almost like Marianne was trying to come up with some kind of response. Perhaps an excuse to justify her actions. But in truth, she had none. That's fine. Marianne finally responded. I don't expect their forgiveness or yours, but if Megatron is allowed to do what he wants with Ragnarok, it'll be bad for all of us. At the very least, help me stop that from happening, not for my sake but for your sake and the sake of those you care for. I know. That's why I'm working with you. Anya had already understood why she formed this alliance with the ghost that stole her life from her. Because it was the only way to stop the Decepticons. That didn't necessarily mean she had to like it, however. With the next hadron blast from her Dark Mordred, it appeared she had struck something. Clearing away the last of the irradiated Earth, to reveal a large metallic surface underneath. I have found something, Anya said, getting the attention of Shockwave as he slid on his feet down the diagonal hole that his Dark Knights had carved their way through. With the Dark Mordred stepping to the side, Shockwave fired blasts from his cannon to clear away more of the ground and reveal what appeared to be an enormous metallic sphere. It was so large, that it seemed this was only one side of it, and it was already twice as large as Shockwave. This relic, it is quite large. Sancha observed. This is no ordinary relic. Shockwave performed a scan on it. There was energon inside, a large quantity of it. Even a Cybertronian life signal, albeit dormant but still alive. In that instant, he knew what was inside. Deal with the interlopers. Shockwave ordered his Dark Knights. They will attempt to ambush us via those tunnels we had discovered. I will join you shortly. With that command, the Dark Knights flew up from the hole and in the direction their puppeteer had instructed for them. Shockwave then aimed his cannon and fired into the metallic sphere, already causing it to crack as he was about to unleash true horror onto his enemies. On the positive side, Zeta Team had managed to locate the underground tunnels that were used to transport the uranium and other similar materials in and out of the reactor, which would lead them directly to their target. Bad news, however, it was rather narrow. While the Pegasus and Chera's Akatsuki could roll their way through with little issue, going single file, Grimlock was a different story. He had to crouch down on his legs and fold his arms inward, moving rather slowly, 1 foot at a time, and it was quite irritating. "Good thing you're not claustrophobic," Sarah joked. "Do I look like I'm in the mood for jokes?" Grimlock questioned. "Hard to tell. You seem to always have a scowl on your face," Sarah cracked, earning a growl from Grimlock. "Well, good news, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel." "Literally," Alice said as they found the end of their path. One by one, the Pegasus, Pink Akatsuki, and Grimlock emerged from the tunnel, the later bashing his head through the roof as he finally stood up freely into a more open area, which had a massive hole in the ceiling that led straight up to the outside. Only to find themselves confronted by the Dark Queen, Dark Mordred, and the 4 headmasters. "I told you he'd be expecting us this way," Grimlock said to his teammates. "Sancha, Dalk, Lucretia, even you, Anya, please." Alice tried to plead with them. "You don't have to do what Shockwave says. We can help you. I know none of you want to serve him. Please." "It's not our choice to make, Alice," Lucretia responded. "It's never been our choice." "Well, if you won't get away from him willingly," Grimlock brandished his sword again. "How about I tear apart those pieces of scrap metal you're using and drag you back?" Before a fight could ensue, however, the entire building began to shake, catching everyone's attention. Dust and small pieces of debris fell from the already ruined ceiling, causing it to break up even more. "What now?" Grimlock questioned. "Zeta Team, be advised, a Cybertronian life signal has just been detected." Fix It alerted. "Autobot or Decepticon?" Sarah asked. "Neither. I've never seen anything like it," Fix It reported. "Whatever it is, it's big and it's heading right for you," Rockshata warned. Right on cue, the ground around them began to crack open, almost as if the entire area had been struck by a high-level magnitude earthquake. Already much of the building around them had begun to collapse. "Everyone out, now!" Sancha exclaimed. Immediately, the Dark Knight units all shot straight up toward the opening. "Go!" Grimlock told his teammates as the tunnel behind them had already collapsed. "I'm right behind you." Sarah and Alice piloted their nightmares and flew upwards while Grimlock leapt toward the nearest wall and tried to climb his way out as fast as he could. As he felt the shaking increasing, the sounds of rumbling coming ever closer, the Dinobot glanced down to see the entire ground he was previously standing on had already collapsed, revealing something large and metallic, moving very rapidly. The Dinobot tried to pick up the pace, but his own heavy mass made it difficult even for him, and whatever was causing this was catching up to him quickly. By the time he made it, whatever was pursuing him had shot up, striking and sending him flying upwards and into the air. Grimlock fell and rolled on the ground briefly as he tried to pull himself up. Alice and Chera's nightmares were immediately by his side as they, and the hovering Dark Knights, saw what the source of the tremors. Diving up and down and all around the old facility, causing it to collapse in on itself, was a Cybertronian creature unlike anything seen before. It was made out of rotating metal that spun all throughout its body. Its entire form seemed a mix between a massive worm and a serpent. Only when the entire building was completely obliterated did the metallic creature stop. Its face, if you could call it that, was a massive circular mouth that had multiple rotating spikes around and all throughout its innards. It also had several tentacle-like attachments near its front that had massive saw-like weapons at the tips. Alice, Sarah, Anya, Dalk, Sancha, and Lucretia all looked in complete and utter shock at the massive monstrosity that had appeared before them. Even Grimlock was rendered speechless. This creature was far larger than even him. "By the Allspark, what is that?" Fix-It stuttered as he and Rockshata saw the creature on their screens from the footage of the nightmares. For one of the rarest times in her life, Rockshata looked genuinely scared, so much so that she lost grip of her pipe and let it drop to the floor. I think that's the relic." Rising up from the creature's mouth was none other than the Decepticon that appeared to be controlling this monstrosity. Shockwave. Grimlock drew his sword and shield, taking a defensive stance. "What have you done?" "This creature that you see here is known as a driller," the Decepticon scientist explained. "A subterranean Cybertronian life form that existed during the prehistoric age of evolution, alongside the Predacons that roamed the surface of Cybertron. They were considered the apex predators among even the Predacons, consuming all that ventured too far underground, but they were rendered extinct during the Great Cataclysm. Upon one of my expeditions in Cybertronian's underground for an energon deposit, I discovered a driller hatchling in stasis, somehow surviving. I took it to my lab, subjecting it to genetic experimentation to serve as a weapon for the Decepticon cause. Autobot forces however raided my facility and captured the creature while it was in stasis, and likely had it ejected into space with the other relics from Yakin. A foolish choice. If they sought to destroy this creature, the more logical option would be to send it to the sun. As of now, the driller is completely under my control. I'm curious as to see how it would fare against my other greatest experiment. He eyed Grimlock specifically. Let's find out which is strongest. Grimlock growled as the driller gunned straight for him. I'll handle this. Deal with the others, he told the rest of Zeta Team as he used his shield to try and protect himself from the driller's advance, which sent him flying and crashing toward the abandoned city, with the monstrosity and its master following close behind. No time to argue, Sarah and Alice were immediately under fire from the Dark Knights, led by the Dark Queen, and forced to take to the skies with their nightmares, all 6 enemies pursuing behind. You know how your friends operate, deal with them. I'll handle the others, Sarah told her. Understood. Alice nodded as she flew the Pegasus straight for the Order, Power, and Land units, leaving Chera's Pink Akatsuki to face off with the airborne Dark Queen, Dark Mordred, and Refrain unit. How fitting, face to face with my greatest mistakes, Sarah thought with reluctance. Well, time to start fixing it. She immediately went on the attack. Grimlock rolled through a couple of old buildings, bringing them down in the process before getting back up on his feet, drawing his sword and shield again as the driller advanced forward. It dove up and down through the ground like a whale would in the ocean, drilling through the hard and solid earth with ease. As it got closer, Grimlock rushed to the right side of the driller and dragged his blade along it, only for one of its tentacles to lash out and smack Grimlock through another building. The Dinobot picked himself back up once again as the driller tore through what was left of the building that separated them and loomed over Grimlock, lashing out with several of its tentacles. Grimlock braced himself with his shield, the buzzsaws at the tips trying to cut through it, but Grimlock was able to use his broadsword to cut off the tips of 2 tentacles, causing the driller to give a pain-induced roar before digging straight underground and rushing back up in front of Grimlock, knocking him down once again. The driller shot through the ground, its bladed mouth wide open, intent on swallowing him whole, but Grimlock was able to roll out of the way in time. In all my studies and observations, I've never seen you on the defensive, Grimlock. Shockwave noted, riding along the back of his driller. Interesting. It would seem that you are no longer the strongest living Cybertronian. Even if Grimlock couldn't overpower the driller, he can at least take out the one that was guiding it. With a roar, Grimlock leapt to the driller's side, driving his blade into it, and causing it to squirm and roar in pain as he pulled himself up to the back to face off with Shockwave, who immediately opened fire, but Grimlock used his shield to block the blasts as he advanced toward his hated enemy. However, the driller's tentacles came up from the sides and struck at Grimlock in all directions, who was forced to use his sword and shield to block and defend himself, though he got cut and sliced along his sides, back, and chest several times. This allowed Shockwave a chance to get in close and blast his cannon right into Grimlock's face, sending him falling off the massive beast. Grimlock groaned as he felt his sides, which were already bleeding energon. Though the damage wasn't that bad and didn't need any proper medical attention, the fact that this beast made him bleed was a concerning sign. Let us continue this experiment, shall we? Shockwave mused as the driller went on the attack once again. Meanwhile, Alice did her best to fend off against the relentless onslaught of Order, Power, and Land. The Pegasus' own blades parrying against the strikes of Order before Alice used her own superior speed to escape and avoid the rapid gunshots from Land, and appeared to be gunning straight for Power, who pulled back its armored fist, forcing Alice to cross the Pegasus' arms and block the attack, but the force of the impact still sent her falling toward the ground. Fortunately, she was able to barely stabilize herself and hover midair as she glanced up at her old team. What's going on? Even though I'm the fastest, I feel like they're holding back. Alice thought. If they wanted to kill me, they could have. Shockwave may want to capture me again, but maybe there's something else to it. Back with Sarah, The pink Akatsuki's katana was once again blocked the massive blade strike from the Dark Queen, though the force still sent her nightmare back. She sensed the incoming refrain and launched a volley of missiles. A few struck refrain's chassis as it tried to defend itself with its scythe, but the damage was still done. Even with Shockwave's modifications, Mao still can't read my mind. But that's about my only advantage here. Sarah thought as she dodged another Hadron blast from the Dark Mordred. I won't be able to solve all my mistakes here, but I can at least do one. Sarah gunned the pink Akatsuki straight toward the refrain unit. She tried to bring her katana down onto it, but refrain used its scythe to block and parry it. However, this left it open for Sarah to run her nightmare's arm into the enemy unit. In direct contact once again, but it should suffice. Sarah channeled her powers once again and directed it through her nightmare and into the refrain unit, allowing her to connect to the mind of whatever was left of Mao inside. With a gasp, the child form of Mao appeared in a grassy field with a soft breeze, clear blue skies, and a bright sun shining over him. The child looked around, confused as to what was going on. Mao, Mao. He heard his name being called and turned around to see none other than the beautiful woman who had been with him when nobody else was. CC. The child ran up to her with a wide smile as she held her arms out and embraced him when he reached her. Mao, I'm sorry. I truly did love you, but I should have tried to actually help you, instead of just using you for my own sake. She said to him as she stroked his hair with her hand. Maybe if I did, things would have been different. But, it's too late now. At the very least, let this moment of comfort ease your pain. Goodbye Mao. In the real world, the katana from Chera's pink Akatsuki had run through the refrain unit before she sliced straight upwards, cutting through the central head unit where Mao's brain was located. Sarah pulled back just before the unit exploded, ending Mao and his suffering once and for all. She was certain that Lelouch and the others would be rather pleased to hear that Mao was now finally gone, and she wouldn't blame them. But now that he's finally gone, the suffering she caused him finally ended. It felt like an enormous weight off her shoulders. A small smile graced her face before she returned to the task at hand. That's one mistake down, on to the next. Sarah turned to the remaining two enemies, but the Dark Mordred was on the attack first, flying straight toward the pink Akatsuki before Sarah tried to move out of the way, only for the larger nightmare to reach out and grab Chera's unit by its leg. Yeah, you're the one in control, aren't you? She said with a glare. Circus C. Look toward the orange stars as we have done. Marianne spoke out, causing Sarah to look in confusion. But it only delayed her counter as she fired her slash Harkins at the Dark Mordred's arm to free her unit. Back with Grimlock, he had once again been knocked back, sent crashing into an old building which began to collapse on top of him. The driller loomed the fallen structure as Shockwave continued to ride on top. Perhaps this test is concluded. This driller appears to be the superior specimen. Regardless, acquisition of your corpse could allow for future experimentation. Shockwave said as he directed his driller to collect the supposedly beaten Dinobot, or to finish him if he was still alive. Suddenly, Grimlock's T-Rex form exploded out of the debris with a roar, right before he bit down on several of the tentacles, tearing them away from the driller's body, causing it to roar before Grimlock unleashed his plasma breath onto it, making sure to aim it for the driller's mouth and do some internal damage. The driller pulled back however, but Grimlock kept up the barrage with his inferno, stomping closer to the driller before he stopped and rammed his head into it, tearing at it with his teeth. However, this only seemed to anger the driller as it quickly moved and coiled its larger body around Grimlock's Dino Alt mode, squeezing it tight to ensnare Grimlock before launching upward to send the Autobot behemoth straight up before crashing down on the ground, where he transformed back to normal. Grimlock, nothing you have at your disposal seems to be any damage to that monster. I recommend a retreat. Fix-It advised. He knew he was right. Grimlock was outmatched against this monster, as much as he hated to admit it. Fine. Send a ground bridge, for me and the others. Grimlock grunted. A portal then opened up to his side as he stood up and turned to face the Decepticon scientist and his pet monster one last time. This isn't over, Shockwave. He ran into the ground bridge portal which vanished as soon as he entered. I agree, Shockwave said. A few seconds later, the Dark Queen and Dark Mordred flew up to rendezvous with him, along with Power, Order, and Land. Shockwave, the enemy has retreated. Anya reported. Refrain was lost in battle. An acceptable loss, as we have gained something more powerful. Shockwave said as the driller below him gave something of a moan that seemed akin to a purr. This mission was a success. After returning to Horai Island, Alice and Sarah were both placed in a decontamination chamber that cleansed off whatever kind of radiation that may have gotten on them. While Alice was only outside her nightmare for a short time, and Sarah was immortal, nobody wanted to take any chances. Their nightmares were also getting a more extensive decontamination in a separate area, being overseen by Perceptor. Both females stepped outside where Rakshata, Fix-It, as well as Grimlock were waiting. The decontamination was a success. There is no longer even a trace of radiation on either of you. Fix-It reported with a smile. While we are certain you were properly protected, it wouldn't hurt to play it safe. Radiation is no joke, Rakshata added. Thank you, Sarah said as Alice nodded as well. Hey, kid. Grimlock spoke to Alice specifically. Sorry we couldn't help your friends. That caused Alice to look down. But we're not done. They're still out there and we will save them. I give you my word. An emotional smile fell on Alice's face. Thank you Grimlock, and I know your friends are still out there too. You'll see them again. Grimlock gave a nod of approval, all the while Sarah couldn't help but think back on what just happened. What Marianne told me, that was the same message Anya relayed for Shirley but, it was different. Orange stars, this time. What does that mean? Is Marianne working with Anya and Shirley's father? What is going on here? Shock, wave. Wah, what in God's name is this monstrosity? Bartley exclaimed as he and Arkvale bared witness to the newly arrived driller that moved about freely through the massive underground base that was the Geass Order, though the creature caused no damage to the surrounding area. Ooh, such raw power, such ferocity, it is beautiful, Arkvale said with a maddened grin, causing Bartley to look at him with a horrified expression. The drillers serve as an effective weapon in the coming battle against the Autobots and the Black Knights. Shockwave said. It, combined with the unit operated by Lanfranc, should prove will render our position impenetrable, if the enemy should discover our location. Oh by the way, thought you should know, Orange's signal went offline just before you came back. Arkvale reported, catching Shockwave's attention. Seems the old Margrave has finally kicked the bucket. Looks like stubbornness doesn't equal invincibility, No matter. Shockwave brushed off. The loss of Gottwald as well as Refrain are to be expected in this time of war, but with the acquisition of the driller, our forces have only grown. Meanwhile, in another location of the Geass Order, Anya, Sancha, Dalk, and Lucretia had just been decontaminated to clean off any potential radiation that may or may not have touched them from their time in Chernobyl. The one that had overseen their cleaning was none other than Joseph Finette. The man entered the room where the four girls were currently resting, reaching into his lab coat to grab a hidden remote and pressed a small button. There was a brief flash from the hidden cameras that lasted only 1 millisecond. We have 30 seconds before the feedback loop ends. Joseph quickly said. Jeremiah's signal went offline, which means he's now with the Autobots and the Black Knights. The message was delivered on our end too. Sancha added. And as it so happened, CC was the one who received it. I suppose it must be fate. Joseph remembered her all too well. That's it then. We've done all we can do. Now all that's left is to wait and hope. Anya said just before their time was up. Once 30 seconds had passed, the feedback loop in the security footage had ended, and Joseph went back to his role to see to the girls were all cleaned and healthy. Hope, Marianne briefly thought as Anya's eyes glowed briefly with a white ring. I had long since abandoned that, probably when I first met Charles and Vivi. But, maybe that was a mistake. Maybe all this world ever really needed, was hope. I'm just glad you were able to find it, Lelouch, Nunnally. Red Triage. The Granbury airship, which served as the mode of transportation for the Sigma team flew through the cloudy skies above massive mountain range that was known as the Alps. Currently, the bridge of the ship was being operated by Toto with the masked wizard right beside her. We've entered the Alps, airspace. Toto reported to the rest of Sigma team via their comms. We should arrive at the relic's location soon. No sign of any Decepticon activity yet. But be ready to be deployed at a moment's notice. Wizard told them. It may be calm right now, but that can all go up in flames any second. Roger. The rest of Sigma team, consisting of Maribel, Orpheus, Uldren, Ashley, Sokia, Tink, Leonhardt, Markia, and Jean, all stood on the overhang bridge in the Nightmare docks, all their respective units right below them. "Comfortable there, Doc," Ashley joked. Their only Autobot companion, Ratchet, was also present in the deployment area. But due to his enormous size, he had to be squeezed in with the rest of the Nightmares. There was barely any room for him to move around as he was currently stuck in between the Lancelot Trial and Lancelot Grail. Yes, I'm quite comfortable." Ratchet made no attempt to hide his sarcasm. "And please don't call me, Doc. Everyone else calls you Doc," Orpheus pointed out. "I don't see how this is any different." They heard Ratchet scoff before Orpheus noticed Sokia staring at him awkwardly. "What? Sorry, it's just, you look just like Oz," Sokia said. "I mean, it's like I'm staring right at her. Only, you know, you're a guy and she's a girl. That said, you're every bit as pretty as she is." Sokia. Uldren placed her hand on her face in embarrassment, while Orpheus simply looked unamused. "We are twins after all," he pointed out. "Well, not every twin scenario comes out with identical twins," Sokia pointed out with a grin. "Two very pretty identical twins. Honestly, if you wouldn't mind a bit of incest, you'd make some beautiful bab." Maribel quickly silenced her by clasping her hand over her subordinate's mouth. Okay, that's enough perverted thoughts out of you." She smiled apologetically to Orpheus. "Sorry, she's just got a very dirty mind. We've all known Uldren for years, been through so much together," Tink said in a tone that was a bit more understanding. "It's a little weird to see she has an identical twin brother." Both Orpheus and Uldren looked toward each other and seemed to be in silent agreement. "Sorry if I'm making anyone feel awkward," Orpheus commented. "No, don't worry. It can't be helped," Uldren assured. "Well, at the very least, I'm happy you two are starting to get along." Maribel smiled as she let go of Sokia. "And anyone who's friends with Uldren is a friend to the rest of us." Orpheus chuckled. "Ironic, Britannia's anti-terrorist unit making friends with somebody from a network of supposed terrorists. Yeah, the world's gotten even more screwed up than before," Ashley joked, earning some chuckles and laughs from several people present. Speaking of which, he looked towards Marika. "Wasn't your older brother one of those pureblood scumbags? Just wondering, how's it feel to be on the opposite side?" Jean stomped onto his foot. "Ow, what the hell was that for? You could at least try to be sensitive, you know," Jean scolded. "It's okay," Marika raised her hand slightly. "Guess it's best to address the elephant in the room. Kuehl and I didn't exactly have the best relationship. We didn't hate each other, per se, but there really wasn't any love either." She looked away slightly. "Our parents valued our noble status above all else. The two of us would often compete to see which of us would be worthy of being the family's successor. Kuehl beat me in nearly every field. Except nightmare training," Leonhardt quickly told his lover. "You always aced that tool in that regard." "True," Marika confirmed. "That's how I ended up here. But it was Kuehl's connections that led him to joining the purebloods." She looked down with disgust. "But the fact he framed an innocent man and used the death of Prince Clovis to help further his and his comrades' agenda, he really seemed to value status above all else, just like our parents." A complicated look fell on her face. "I'm not going to celebrate my brother's death or anything. I wish he hadn't died, but at the same time, I know it was probably unavoidable." She looked to Ratchet. "I don't hold any grudges, I promise." Ratchet gave a nod of understanding. "So, changing the subject, what exactly can we expect to find from this Yakin relic?" Tink asked Ratchet. "Hard to say," the Autobot medic replied. "Yakin was home to many ancient relics as well as Decepticon weapons of mass destruction." "So about 50-50, Ashley asked. 50% chance of being an alien gun, and another 50 of being an alien star chart." "Not quite the way I'd put it, but something along those lines," Ratchet confirmed. "All the more reason to get a hold of it before Megatron does. Even if it isn't a weapon, knowledge can be power, especially when it comes to the ancients. And power can be very dangerous in the wrong hands," Jean said, looking down as she was instinctively reminded of her former leader, Shinhyuga Shang, and all the destruction he would have unleashed with his own power. "That's why we're here," Aldrin said in assurance to her newfound comrade. To make sure that doesn't happen. And it won't. Orpheus agreed with his twin sister. We'll either get this relic or destroy it. Back on the bridge, all was silent as Wizard simply sat on the command chair while Toto worked at the operator controls. Neither of them said anything to each other, but it wasn't awkward for either of them. Toto just remained focused on her work, keeping an eye on the radar for any possible sign of enemy activity. Though Wizard would silently admit that it is rather ironic to see this girl again. She didn't know who was behind that mask, but he recognized her. Toto was a maid to the Zevon family and Oegros remembered her very well. She grew up alongside Aldrin and they were practically siblings. After he took the head after he arranged for his sister's death, something that would haunt him forever, and Aldrin left to join the military, Toto followed without question. He couldn't help but admire the kind of loyalty and friendship. Even if Aldrin and Orpheus hated him at the end of all this and decided to kill him, he was at least glad they had real friends and family to depend on. However, Toto didn't particularly feel the same. Nobody else in the world knew the truth about her. The mission that VV assigned her to when she was only a child, the reason she had a Geass, was to keep Aldrin and Orpheus from ever meeting one another, and if they did, she'd use her Geass to wipe their memories of the event. But the more time she spent with Aldrin, the more she came to love her, the young Zevon treating her like family, and the more torn up she was internally. But now, given the state of the world and current circumstances, she felt greatly relieved that Aldrin could be with her brother, and she would no longer have the need to wipe their memories. In a way, she was glad the Decepticons destroyed Britannia and everything Charles and Vivi built, but she would still give her all to protect Aldrin and her friends and family. Suddenly, the alarm sounded. What is it? Wizard stood up from his chair. We have company, Toto revealed. Just outside the flying Grandberry, a sleek Reaper drone had flown at faster speeds, descending from the cloud cover and straight toward the massive airship. It then transformed to reveal the silent and dangerous Decepticon that landed on the top of the vessel. Soundwave wasted no time, locating the cockpit and quickly made his way over before extending two tentacles from his chest which stuck to the cockpit before sending an electrical surge into it. However, a series of turrets emerged from the sides of the hull around Soundwave before opening fire on him. He quickly deployed Ravager and Laserbeak, who immediately went on the attack. The former leapt to one turret to rip it to shreds with his fangs and claws before shooting at the turrets on his side while Laserbeak flew to shoot out the turrets on the other side. Toto struggled to regain control as Soundwave's electrical surges began to fry some of the Grandberry's internal systems. We've lost all defensive turrets. We have to get that con off our ship now. Wizard immediately made contact with the rest of the ship. Soundwave is here. He's attacking the Grandberry's hull. Get into your nightmares and be ready for deployment. Sigma team wasted no time in manning their respective nightmares and prepared them for battle, though Ashley seemed a bit less serious than the rest. All 10 of us just for one con. Doesn't that seem a bit overkill? Not that I mind. Do not underestimate Soundwave, Ashley. Ratchet told him sternly. There's a reason Megatron keeps him so close to his side. All the more reason to get him off my ship. Maribel said as her Lancelot trial powered on. Is everyone ready for deployment? Yes ma'am. Aldrin, Tink, Sokia, Leonhardt, Marika, and Jean all reported at the same time. Ready whenever the rest of you are. Orpheus confirmed. Sorry Ratchet, but you might wanna hang on to one of our nightmares. Maribel told him as the Autobot medic remained in between the nightmares of Maribel and Aldrin. Sorry, for what? Ratchet asked in confusion. Toto. Emergency drop. Now. Maribel ordered. Roger. Dropping now. The bay doors suddenly opened, causing all 9 nightmares, and the Autobot medic, to fall from the Grandberry and into the open sky. As the nightmares quickly activated their respective float systems, Ratchet, the only one who couldn't fly, gave a loud and startled scream. Fortunately, the Lancelot trial had caught him before he fell too far. That's why I told you to hold on. Maribel said. Duly noted. Ratchet confirmed as he clung to the red nightmare before they all flew their way to the top. Soundwave was shot in the back, halting his attack on the cockpit as he, Ravage, and Laserbeak all looked up to see he was surrounded by 9 hovering nightmares including the Lancelot Trial and Grail, the Guka Byakuan, 2 Bradfords, the Vincent Graham, the Zetland, the Dagonet, and even Jean's newest nightmare, upgraded from the Geass, the RPI-32A Aglovale. Surrender Soundwave. Maribel demanded as Ratchet let go of her nightmare dropped down onto the ship's hull. You are outnumbered. In direct response to that, Soundwave had opened a ground bridge portal just above him, dropping down the dangerous 6-bot team of Decepticons known as the Constructicons. Someone call for backup, Mixmaster declared. Hey, those are some fancy nightmares up there. How about we tear them apart? Scrapper stated as the constructions readied themselves for battle. The entirety of Sigma Squad looked either surprised or serious in that one moment. Ashley was in the later category as their problem of 1 con suddenly became 7 total. Ooh, see your point, Doc. I tried to tell you. Ratchet shook his head in annoyance before he drew his arm blades and both sides clashed with one another. Scavenger's massive body leapt over the side of the Grandberry, but rather than fall, he grappled onto the side of the vessel with one of his large arms before climbing underneath it, using both his arms to hang on. He looked ready to use his wheel-like body to tear up the insides of the Grandberry, but the Bradfords piloted by Leonhardt and Makira both flew in and shot at him with their Harkins, but Scavenger batted them away. A pair of double-barrel Energon blasters appeared on his shoulders as he shot at them, forcing the 2 nightmares to flee and return fire. As the rest of the Crimson Knights engaged in battle with the Constructicons around him, Ratchet charged Soundwave, who swerved to avoid Ratchet's swipe with his arm blade before he batted him back with his own unnaturally long arm. Ratchet took a bit to recover, but he was able to roll out of the way and avoid Soundwave's electric tentacles. When Soundwave shot said tentacles at him again, the Lancelot Trial landed in between the 2 Cybertronians to slice the tentacles away with its dual MVS blades. I got your back, Ratchet. Maribel smirked, something Ratchet returned with a smile. Thank you, Maribel. The Autobot medic nodded before he turned around at the sound of a growl to face the pouncing Ravage. Uldren's Lancelot Grail swung its own blades towards Mixmaster, who danced around them easily enough before unleashing a stream of an acidic-like substance at her, which Uldren tried to block by crossing her nightmare's blades. She was shocked to see the swords already melting away before she discarded them, and tried to come in with her short-ranged sword blazer, but Mixmaster curved under that and smacked the Grail in the face to knock it down before he aimed his arm mixer weapon at her again. Let's see how fast that thing melts, Mixmaster said, only to get shocked in the back by the Byakuin's massive armament arm right before the White Nightmare kicked him back. He would have fallen off the ship entirely, but the Constructicon leader was able to grab a hold of the side. Orpheus, Uldren looked in surprise as she brought her nightmare up. We agreed to work together, and that means watching each other's backs, right? Orpheus smiled in his sister's direction. Still surprised at first, a smile formed on her face. Right. The Zevon twins stood together as Mixmaster pulled himself back up and charged again. Longhaul tried to grapple onto Tink's Zetland, trying to see which of the heavier-duty units was the strongest. It almost looked like the large green Constructicon was about to crush the black and red Nightmare. Ah, I didn't know you cared. Tink joked before activating his Blaze Luminous shield to knock Longhaul off. Tink then focused a pair of missiles on the large Constructicon, firing and knocking him back, but Longhaul only skidded back on his feet a short bit before glaring at his enemy. Oh boy, guy's big and heavy for a reason, Tink said seriously before he hovered his Nightmare in the air to avoid the grapples of Longhaul once more. Hook flailed his hook-like weapon toward the hovering Vincent Graham, snagging onto its shoulder before pulling down to slam the Vincent Graham onto the hull of the ship, shaking up Sokia inside. Oh, so you wanna play dirty, huh? Sokia glared as she pulled up the Graham, quickly pulling up her Nightmare's armored right arm to block the Hook's slash before quickly drawing her wolf's tooth dagger to slice off the cable, severing Hook's weapon, much to his shock. Well, two can play at that game. Scrapper rushed the Aglovale, trying to punch it, but Jean swerved around him to draw her Nightmare's sword and try to bring it down onto him. But Scrapper not only ducked under it, he bashed his shoulder into the Silver Nightmare, knocking it back, but Jean quickly recovered, coming back to back with the Dagonet as it faced off with Bonecrusher. So, I see you're having trouble, Jean. Ashley maintained his grin. Pretty crazy to be on the defensive end for once. You got some kind of plan? She asked. Yeah, let's trade dance partners and see where that goes, Ashley said as the Dagonet leapt over the Aglovale, A sword in one hand and a gun in the other as Ashley shot at Scrapper, who crossed his arms to block it before getting sliced at and knocked down by a sword strike from the Dagonet. In the meanwhile, Jean followed her friend's lead and swung her blade at Bonecrusher, who tried to use his excavator, third arm, on his back to block it before he brought his knee into the Aglovale's chest to knock it up, but she quickly recovered and pulled her controls up to spin her nightmare up vertically and deliver a flip kick to Bonecrusher's face and knock him back. Maribel swung her Lancelot's Trial MVS swords at Soundwave, who ducked and blocked all her strikes with his arms, catching the next strike between his arm and side and slapped her Red Nightmare back with his tentacle. The former Britannian princess tried to catch her breath a bit. "A tough guy, aren't ya?" she commented before charging forward again. Ratchet used his arm blade to bat away Ravage as he tried to pounce on him, but the robotic jungle cat recovered and began to circle around the larger Autobot like a wild predator with the medic eyeing him cautiously. As Ravage walked closer towards Maribel's fight with Soundwave, Ratchet noticed something small and fast moving in on her position. "Maribel. Laserbeak incoming at 43 degrees from your 6. Ratchet warned as Ravage pounced on him again, knocking him down. Ratchet held the jungle cat back as it tried to snarl and bite at him, but Ratchet was able to swipe him off. Maribel happened to hear Ratchet's warning and saw on her Lancelot's radar that there was indeed something incoming. She used one of her MVS blades on her right arm to slice at Soundwave, distracting him while using the Trial's left arm to fire a slash-harken at the incoming Mini-Con, scoring a direct hit on its right wing and causing it to tumble mid-air, before falling from the sky and into the clouds below. "Guess you're gonna need another pet bird," Maribel said to Soundwave, who shot both his tentacles to push back the Lancelot Trial. Soundwave then made a brief observation of the battles around him, even Skavonger's down below. This battle seemed pretty even for the most part, but the defeat of their enemy was not his objective. They had to end this battle now and resume their hunt for the relic. Soundwave then transformed back into his drone mode and flew around the Granberry's rear, concentrating all his fire on the starboard engine. It wasn't long before the engine caught fire, causing the whole vessel to begin tip over. "We just lost our starboard engine," Toto reported as the bridge began to tilt to the side, with her trying to hang onto the controls and Wizard doing the same on the command chair. "Can you stabilize it?" the masked man questioned. "No. This ship is going down," she replied. This prompted Wizard to grab her hand and pull her away from the controls. "Then it's time to leave." He ran out of the bridge, pulling the young girl right behind him as he contacted the rest of Sigma team. "The Granberry's going down. Abandoned ship. Repeat. Abandoned ship." "You all heard the man," Orpheus told the rest of his comrades. "Everyone off. Now." The Byakuan took to the skies with the Lancelot Grail alongside him. The Lancelot Trial grabbed a hold of Ratchet before flying off along with the Vincent Graham, Zetland, Dagonet, and Aglovale. Even the Bradford pair flew from the underbelly of the falling Granberry. Many of the Constructicons had already fallen off the vessel, with Scavenger already letting go from the bottom hull. Long Haul, Bonecrusher, and Hook slipped off while Mixmaster and Scrapper just jumped off. The Constructicons didn't fall very far, however, as Soundwave had already opened several groundbridge portals to catch them and teleport them to safety just before he flew away to resume his hunt for the Yakin relic. As the Granberry fell, and explosions erupted from the rear as the engines caught fire, another explosion erupted from the docking area as the Agravain flew out, piloted by Wizard with Toto riding inside the cockpit alongside him. All 10 Nightmares, as well as the hanging Ratchet, could only watch as they saw their vessel fall from the sky. It fell through the clouds before heading toward the mountain range below, skidding along the side of one mountain, causing it to tilt and spin even more before crashing upside down on a ridge and grinding to a halt. With a feeling of defeat and reluctance, Sigma team descended to where their ship had crashed to try and assess the damage. After landing and stepping out from their respective Nightmares, they all got a good look at the unfortunate fate of their beloved ship. The Granberry looked like it may never fly again. "There's no way we can fix this. It's completely totaled." Toto shook her head with a sigh, causing the former Glindonites to look down in shame. Ever since the fall of Britannia, the Granberry had been their home. It felt like a part of the team, whom they had now just lost. Sokia walked up and placed one hand on a piece of the Granberry's damaged hull. "Farewell, old friend, you were a faithful and mighty steed. Can't believe she's gone. Makira looked down with Leonhardt clasping her hand and Tink putting his hands on both their shoulders. Even Ashley had to admit this was rather upsetting, though he didn't feel that strong a connection to the Granberry. He actually did like the ship in the time he spent with the Glinda Knights. Sorry. He looked towards Maribel with a sincere expression, which she returned with a sad yet appreciate smile as she put a hand on his shoulder as silent thanks. Maybe there's a way we can salvage something from this. Aldrin looked to Wizard as well as Ratchet. Perhaps, but that's not our objective at the moment. Wizard said. Yes, we still have our mission. Ratchet got everyone back to the mission. Soundwave and the Constructicons may have already reached the relic. Ratchet's right, we need to go. Now, Orpheus said. Wait. Jean stopped everyone from moving as she caught something out of the corner of her eyes. What is it? Maribel asked as Jean quickly made her way over to what they originally thought was a small pile of debris, but she quickly pulled out her pistol and aimed it at something that sparked on the ground before approaching cautiously. Ratchet, Wizard, and the others made their way closer as well and saw what Jean had discovered. It was Laserbeak, grounded and heavily damaged, but still possibly dangerous. Once they all saw it, all the humans pulled out whatever guns they had and aimed it at the downed Mini-Con, with Wizard being the one to cautiously approach it. Wizard, be careful, Ratchet warned. Laserbeak is the eyes and ears of Soundwave. The masked man walked his way up to the front, tapping his foot on one of Laserbeak's wings, backing away and keeping his pistol trained on it. There was no movement. Getting a little more daring, Wizard shot at the wing, causing all of Sigma team to aim their weapons at it, while Ratchet eyed it cautiously. There was still no movement, which was enough for Wizard to lower his guard as he smiled. Not anymore, he isn't. The sun slowly began to set around the area as Soundwave's drone mode flew and arrived at the location of the coordinates for this particular Yakin relic, the flat top of a large natural arch on the side of one of the largest mountains. The silent Decepticon surveyed the area for a brief moment before activating his ground bridge portal again, allowing the Constructicons to arrive as well. Did you find it? Mixmaster asked. Soundwave nodded in confirmation before pointing to the whole team, sending a message that Mixmaster understood. Got it. Secure the site. The lead Constructicon told his subordinates as they began to spread out around the area. Keep an eye out for any bots and their human pets. They're still out there somewhere. So, is it dead? Marika asked cautiously as Ratchet took out his scanner to get a proper reading on the disabled Mini-Con. No. Operating system appears functional, but offline. The medic informed. The damage it sustained clearly affected its optic and audio receptors. It's blind and deaf. Orpheus smirked. That's one less pet for Soundwave. Nice shot, Mary. Expect no less from you. Aldrin threw one arm around her princess in congratulatory fashion. Don't celebrate. Maribel broke off. We didn't come here to cripple a Mini-Con, we came here to retrieve a potential doomsday weapon. Agreed, we must retrieve the relic immediately. Ratchet said. Hold on a second, Ashley got an idea, stopping everyone from leaving. I've been spending some time with those wrecker guys back on Horai Island and they come up with some flashy stuff. This seems like a good opportunity to cause some damage. Care to elaborate, Asura? Wizard questioned as everyone gave him his attention. Bird boy here ain't dead so old silent but Deadly's gonna come back and find him, right? Ashley began. Why not slip in a little surprise? Let's say, a couple of live grenades. Pretty sure we can even get a few missiles out of whatever's left of the Granberry. The second that Khan puts his pet back inside and boom. No more Soundwave. That might actually be pretty good idea. Tink said. I'm with Ashley on this. Jean was in agreement. Yes, the relic is important, but this could be an opportunity for us. Taking out one of Megatron's most irreplaceable henchmen, his surveillance chief no less, could deal quite the blow to the Decepticons. I'm not exactly in favor of assassination. Maribel was reminded far too much of the incident that took her mother and sister's life with this idea. But removing Soundwave from the equation does seem like a good idea. Even Ratchet looked intrigued by the idea. Why plant a mere incendiary device, when we could plant a more devastating bomb? What are you talking about? Marika asked as Ratchet walked over to the disabled Laserbeak. A virus. Ratchet explained as his right hand converted into his blowtorch tool, which he used to slowly and precisely open Laserbeak's outer hull and expose its inner systems. One engineered to pass from Laserbeak to Soundwave, then directly into the Decepticon network, where it will transmit the contents of the Yakin database to us. Whoa, seriously? Leonhardt exclaimed as everyone looked in surprise. You do that? Sokia questioned. Why stop with just the database? Orpheus asked, looking rather eager himself. Think maybe we can use that virus to tap directly into the Decepticon network and download all their information. Their base locations, their weapons, everything. That would be too great a risk. Ratchet disagreed. We would run the possibility of Soundwave retracing the virus to Horai Island and learning all our secrets. Then perhaps all their information on the Yakin relics, specifically the ones they've already obtained. Wizard suggested, such as the Forge of Solus Prime, or even any of these other active relics they may have retrieved and our comrades were unable to. Yes, I do believe that to be manageable. Ratchet confirmed. Risking one relic to obtain he rest is a worthwhile gamble. Seems a bit overly complicated for me and not as flashy, but if it means sticking it to those metal bastards, I can get behind it. Ashley was on board as well. This all sounds well and good, and I'd be willing to help you as well, Ratchet, but do we really have the time and capability to pull off that kind of programming? Toto asked. Not alone. I will require backup, Ratchet said with a knowing smile. Horai Island. Many Black Knight operators were currently within one of the operation towers on Horai Island, doing what they can to monitor the mission status of all the ongoing retrieval operations on Horai Island. The one leading it all was Nina Einstein. Things seemed to be going smoothly for the most part, though all their teams had engaged the enemy, there wasn't that much she can do other than hope they would succeed. Nina. She suddenly got an alert on her personal portable tablet. She quickly accessed it to see it was Ratchet contacting her. We have a situation. Meanwhile, the Constructicons had already managed to secure the perimeter of the location where the Yakin relic was hidden. Mixmaster and Soundwave both stood at the top of the archway as the former received a wave from Bonecrusher. The perimeter is secure, no sign of the enemy. Mixmaster reported to Soundwave, who nodded in acknowledgement before his own built-in scanners locked on the specified coordinates he had downloaded from the Yakin database beforehand. Found the relic. Soundwave nodded before proceeding to extend his tentacles, their tops spinning like drills before burrowing into the ground. Think you could use a hand? Digging stuff out is kinda what we do. Mixmaster offered, but Soundwave ignored him. I'll take that as a no. He shook his head. We're more than just muscle. Mixmaster thought to himself. Honestly, I think the whole reason he even brought us along is because we formed Devastator. I do like killing Autobots, but I'm not just a killing machine. Back with Sigma Team, Ratchet had informed Nina of the situation and told her their plan. If you can write a source code for the virus, my scanner will translate it to Cybertronian script as it uploads. Ratchet, I can write the code, but if we want to keep this virus hidden from somebody like Soundwave or any other Decepticon, we'll need some kind of decoy. Nina explained, something the others heard as well. A decoy? What, like a second virus? Leonhardt asked. I don't think we have time for something like that. An idea then came to Ratchet. Or something less complicated, and bit more flashy. He looked towards Ashley, all eyes then set on him as he came to the realization of what he was talking about. A decoy is in, we want them to find it, but it doesn't blow or take anyone out. Ashley asked for clarification. That's typically what a decoy means. Maribel teased. Here, take one of the Zetland's missiles. Tink offered as he was already in his nightmare and briefly deactivated its weapon system, opening the missile silos. This allowed Ratchet to walk up and extract one missile, which he carefully opened to extract the explosive warhead inside. On its own, it wouldn't do much damage. But in its current position, inside of Laserbeak, inside of Soundwave, it would likely deal devastating damage to the Decepticon surveillance chief, and that is exactly what they want the enemy to think. So, we got an explosive, inside of Laserbeak, inside of Soundwave, Sokia summed up. Isn't there some kind of fancy dish like that, where it's a turkey inside a duck inside a chicken? A turducken, Makira answered. And I think it's the other way around. Yeah, a turkey would be too big to stuff into either of those. Jean added. I think it's the duck that goes inside the chicken and that goes inside the turkey. I always thought it was the chicken inside the duck. Hey, who the heck invented something so convoluted anyway? Some random elitist Britannian with a sadistic side. Leonhardt questioned. Weren't you and the rest of your team all Britannian elitists? Orpheus reminded. Touché. Leonhardt granted. Ahem. Ratchet coughed loudly, getting their attention. Can we please focus back on the mission? Nina. Already working on the code, I'll have it sent soon. She confirmed. In the meantime, the rest of us will try and buy you some time, Ratchet. And hopefully retrieve the relic. Wizard said as he entered the Agravain, prompting everyone else to do so as they quickly manned their respective nightmares. Toto, you stay here and help Ratchet however you can. Mary Bell ordered. Yes ma'am. She nodded as all 10 nightmares shot into the air and flew in the same direction, leaving Ratchet and Toto alone as they got to work on Laserbeak. Back with the Decepticons, Mixmaster continued to watch as Soundwave dug deeper into the ground beneath them. Mixmaster could tell from the visual on Soundwave's visor that he was nearing the buried relic. A beeping noise and target lock on the visor all but confirmed that they had found it. Soundwave then retracted his tentacles, revealing that his right one had obtained the relic. It appeared to be a small gun-like device. That's it. Mixmaster seemed rather underwhelmed. I was expecting something a bit bigger. Though the head Constructicon was unimpressed, Soundwave knew exactly what it was that he had retrieved. The Resonance Blaster, a weapon of his own personal creation. It was truly fortunate that Soundwave himself would be sent to this set of coordinates. Incoming. Long Haul alerted as multiple missiles and hadron blasts rained down from the sky all around the area, forcing the Constructicons and Soundwave to dodge and avoid all the oncoming attacks and resulting explosions. The dust quickly cleared to reveal 10 nightmares had arrived and hovered above the group. At the forefront was the Agravain, flanked by the Guka Byakuan and Lancelot Trial. On the right side hovered the Dagonet, Aglovale, and 2 Bradfords, while on the left hovered the Lancelot Grail, Zetland, and Vincent Graham. It's them again. Those annoying humans. Mixmaster shouted. That's the Crimson Knights to you, Cons. Ashley shouted back. Ready for a rematch. Because we certainly are. Uldren glared. This will be your only opportunity. Hand over the relic or we'll take it by force. Wizard demanded. Here's hoping you chose the latter option. Orpheus said, gripping the controls of his nightmare. Mixmaster scoffed. I think we all know the answer to that. Constructicons, attack. With that, the Decepticons opened fire with whatever long-range weapons they had, forcing the nightmares of Sigma Team to disperse and return fire. Already explosions lit up the whole mountainside as the battle began. Mary Bell and Uldren flew directly at Soundwave, both variants of the Lancelot drawing their respective blades and slicing at the silent Decepticon. Facing off against both the Grail and Trial put Soundwave on the defensive, using his unnatural arms to block their strikes or swiftly dodge it. He ducked and swerved under a slice from the Grail and flipped over the Trial as it tried to impale him. He landed to face both of them before deploying both Ravage and Rumble to assist him. Time to crack open some nightmares. Rumble used his pile drivers to launch himself into the air and straight toward the Trial, prompting Maribel to lunge her blade at him, but Rumble activated and drove his pile drivers onto the tip of the blade, causing it to vibrate and crack before breaking apart much to Maribel's shock. What? She was then rocked in her cockpit as Ravage rushed around her, firing energon blasts from his mouth and tail all across the Lancelot Trial. She fired her Harken at Ravage, who leapt out of the way, while using her remaining sword to slice at Rumble, who slid under the Trial and shock up the ground with his pile drivers, prompting Maribel to fly into the air. She took a brief glance to see Uldren was facing Soundwave alone, with the fight more in Soundwave's favor as he blocked one of the Grail's sword strikes before one of his tentacles latched onto the Grail, lifted it up briefly before slamming her down onto the ground. Ashley gave a laugh as he swung his Dagonet's blade at Mixmaster, who dodged and leapt back, prompting Ashley move forward and bring his blade down again, just as Mixmaster fired a corrosive substance from his mixer weapon. Though Ashley pulled back just in time, he looked in shock to see his sword was already melting, which he discarded. Hey, no fair. All's fair in war, kid. Mixmaster said right before the Aglovale appeared to kick Mixmaster in the back and knock him from behind. I agree, so you wouldn't mind an attack from behind, right? Jean grinned. Scavenger wheeled forward, the largest Constructicon present aiming his side-mounted blasters at the 2 Bradfords again piloted by Makira and Leonhardt, both doing their best to avoid it as the later flew in from behind to try and attack with his arm-mounted Harkins, but Scavenger spun his wheel configuration backwards. Whoa! Leonhardt was barely able to dodge the crushing blow, but this left Scavenger open to Makira's attack as she flew straight forward, her Bradford spear going for his face. Though it did pierce Scavenger's eye, causing him to glower in pain, he was able to swipe her back with his arm. Orpheus drove his Byakugan straight toward Bonecrusher, thrusting his electrical barrel device at him, but Bonecrusher ducked underneath the thrust and grabbed the Byakugan to tackle and drive it into the nearby rocky wall, causing a brief rumble in the area that shook up Orpheus in his cockpit. But Orpheus was able to steel himself as he drove the Byakugan's knee into Bonecrusher to knock him back before spinning his nightmare around to slam his foot into his face and knock him back. Hey there, big guy. Tinks Zetland faced off against Longhall once more. Ready for a rematch? You need to ask. Longhall slammed his fists together as he rushed the Zetland again, grabbing it by the shoulders and slamming the heavier Nightmare down to the ground. But Tink was prepared as he fired a couple missiles at close range to blast off Longhall and knock him back. Scrapper and Hook tried to double-team the Agravain as the former tried to grab the Nightmare from behind while the latter attempted to shoot its head off, but Wizard spun his controls to spin so that Hook would end up shooting Scrapper instead, forcing him to let go. The Vincent Graham came in with a thrust of its luminous cone drilled toward Scrapper, but he was able to leap back just as both Nightmares ascended into the air. Wizard, we're not making a lot of headway like this. Sokia told him. Agreed. He noted as he saw most of the Crimson Knights seemed to fight on even footing with the Constructicons, with Maribel and Uldren having quite a bit of trouble with Soundwave and his mini-cons. He then came up with a strategy. All units, get airborne and fire at the base of this plateau. Cause a rockslide and send all these Decepticons falling. Wizard ordered. Understood. Orpheus saw where he was going with this and shoot his Byakugan into the air, with everyone else right behind him, including the Lancelot Trial and Grail, which broke off from their fight against Soundwave. Aim your heavy artillery at a single point. Now, Wizard ordered as the Agravain fired its arm-mounted Hadron cannons, with the Vincent Graham and Zetland doing the same as the Lancelot Trial shot its Varus rifle. All converged at a single point, which caused the entire natural plateau to destabilize and crumble. Hey, only I cause a crumble. Rumble cursed before he and Ravage returned to Soundwave, who simply transformed and flew away, seemingly leaving the Constructicons behind as they fell and slid off the mountain side with the ensuing rockslide. Talk about crumbling expectations, Leonhardt commented. Where's Soundwave? Uldren asked. Directly above us. Orpheus answered as they all looked to see Soundwave transform and land on an elevated rock that was well above him. 10 of us against one con. We can take M. Ashley grinned. Suddenly, a loud smashing noise was heard beneath them, getting all their attention. What was that? Sokia asked nervously. Makira got a good look at her Nightmare's radar system. Guys, there's a massive energon surge directly below us. Out of the large dust cloud below them shot an enormous metallic arm, which grappled onto the side of the mountain, followed by another. As the dust slowly began to clear, the whole of Sigma team looked down in shock and terror to see a massive metallic monster climbing its way back up the mountain. Devastator online. Oh scrap. Maribel's face paled. Back with Ratchet and Toto, the former appeared to have everything ready as he contacted his partner. Nina, I've jacked into Laserbeak's uplink transmitter. When you're ready, I'll bring its operating system back online in order for it to receive the transfer. I've almost got it ready. Stand by. Ratchet, won't starting up Laserbeak's systems alert us to Soundwave? Toto asked. Perhaps, but we have no alternative. Ratchet replied. But if Soundwave sees us, or even sees us through Laserbeak, he'll know something's up. She stated. Yes, we have the decoy with the bomb, but do you think that Soundwave would expect that from you? Do you have another idea? Ratchet asked. Toto gave a sigh before responding. Do you think a Geass would work on Laserbeak? To say Ratchet was surprised was an understatement. He knew Maribel had a Geass, but he wasn't aware one of her subordinates had one. My Geass allows me to erase the memories of others, but I need direct eye contact in order for it to work. Toto explained. If Laserbeak is connected to Soundwave, and I use my Geass on Laserbeak, provided it works, I can probably erase yours and my faces from their memories of this particular day. Soundwave will never suspect you were here, and that'll make him think Maribel and the others were the ones who implanted the bomb, further covering for the virus. Ratchet took the moment to think. Perhaps, provided your Geass will even work. Depending on how strong it is, it may not work on Cybertronians if it's too weak. But then again, Laserbeak isn't like a natural Cybertronian. Honestly, I'd say there is only a 50% chance of something like that working. He got a good look at her uncertain face. Judging by your expression, I'm assuming the rest of your team is unaware of this. Toto only nodded in confirmation, looking down in shame. Was it Sarah or VV who granted you that power? Ratchet questioned. VV, she answered. It's a long story, and I don't think we have time to explain it. Ratchet simply shook his head with a sigh. I won't ask on the details, but you should tell your friends about this. You owe them that much. I understand. Now, let's operate under the assumption that your Geass will indeed work on Laserbeak, and by extension Soundwave. Here's what you need to do. Ratchet began to lay out his instructions. Despite the obvious risks, this could still be a viable strategy in order to ensure the virus worked as intended. This could be the key they need to win this war. Devastator had climbed to the uppermost part of the mountain, using his enormous size and strength to clear away huge chunks of the summit, providing himself with some flat ground to stand on as the 10 Nightmares of Sigma team fired their guns and even heavy artillery, but the large combiner simply blocked the attacks by holding up his arms, leading to minimal damage. We're not even making a dent in this monster. Jean exclaimed. Hey Mary, think maybe you can use your Geass on that thing. Get it to work for us. Ashley questioned. I'll have to get in close. But I don't think it'll let me. Maribel replied. I can get you there, but you gotta be as close to me as possible. Orpheus told her. Alright, the rest of us will keep Devastator occupied. Wizard stated. Spread out and hit from all sides, keep him from focusing. He was the first to attack with the Agravain, firing its arm-mounted Hadron cannons as well as all its missiles, with the Zetland providing additional bombardment from above. Devastator crossed his arms again, forcing him backwards slightly with the resulting explosion, but he stood his ground and prevented himself from falling. His left arm converted into a drill as he tried to lunge it at the 2 Nightmares, but they flew around and avoided it for the most part. The Lancelot Grail was next, flying in from behind and landing at Devastator's back before Uldren tried to plunge her sword into it, but Devastator shook his body wildly to shake her off before smacking his left arm to send the Grail flying. Though Uldren was able to stabilize herself, her Grail had taken quite a bit of damage. Sokia's Vincent Graham, with the Dagonet and Aglovale, covering her, tried to come at Devastator from underneath. Get him in the scrotum. Ashley shouted as he fired his Dagonet's gun at Devastator's underside. Really? You're making those kinds of jokes, now? Jean exclaimed as she lunged her Nightmare's sword into Devastator's right leg as Sokia did the same with her Vincent Graham's drill into the left leg. Hey, I'm trying to not be totally freaked out of my mind right here. Ashley exclaimed, but was caught off by Devastator's roar as the behemoth shook its legs to knock off the Aglovale and Graham before attempting to stomp on all 3 Nightmares, which they were just barely able to avoid. Both Bradfords circled around Devastator's head to fire their greatest weapons. Their respective Megiddo Harkins shot out and combined to fire the Hadron Spear, a condensed blast of Hadron energy into Devastator's face. This did manage to cause the combiner pain, but he quickly recovered as he attempted to lunge his drill at Makira's Bradford. Makira. Leonhardt shot his Bradford at his lovers and pushed her out of the way in time, getting his own unit grazed in the process. They got him pretty distracted. What's the plan? Maribel asked as her Lancelot trail literally held onto the waist of the Guka Byakuan. Orpheus, eyes lit up as the Geass sigil appeared in both his pupils. I've never done this before with somebody else with me. You have to hold on, and I won't know how long this will last. Get ready to use your Geass. Got it. Maribel accepted. As Orpheus, Geass activated, making it as powerful as he could. A red energy sphere expanded around both his and Maribel's Nightmare, creating the illusion of Soundwave's Reaper drone form. It tried to fly in as close as Devastator as possible. Meanwhile, the real Soundwave continued to watch from a safe distance. If he got close enough, he could easily neutralize this with his own Geass Canceller, but Devastator was already covered, so there was no need to intervene. Devastator noticed the approaching illusion. Soundwave. It got in real close to his head just as the illusion vanished, Orpheus unable to sustain it any longer as his head felt like it was about to split open. Before the combiner could react at the sudden appearance of two enemy units, the cockpit of the Lancelot trial opened up, after it was set on autopilot, as Maribel quickly stood up, activating her own Geass as the sigil appeared in both her eyes and she stared right into the monster's optics. Devastator. You are my puppet. The sigil flew directly into Devastator's optics, but the second it made contact. Activate Geass Canceller. The combiner's optics turned from red to green as the upside-down sigil of a Geass appeared, neutralizing Maribel's own power in an instant. What? The horrified former princess's face went pale. Did he just say Geass Canceller? Orpheus seemed just as terrified himself. Everyone in Sigma team had heard that over their nightmares comms and were just as shocked as everyone else, and even more so as Devastator managed to grab a hold of both the trial and Byakuin in his right hand. Mary! Orpheus! Uldren shouted as she saw her lover and brother caught in the monster's grasp. You too. Watch. Watch your friends all die. Devastator growled as his chest plate opened up, activating his most dangerous weapon, the Vortex Grinder. It already began to create a massive vacuum force as he tried to aim it at Sigma team. Scatter. Don't let it suck you in. Wizard exclaimed as all 8 remaining nightmares attempted to pull out, but Sokia's Vincent Graham did manage to get caught in its vortex. He's got me. He's got me. She tried to put full throttle on her nightmare's thrusters, but they barely made any headway. Hang on. Ashley's Dagonet slammed into the ground as he jammed his sword in to keep himself grounded before firing both his Harkins, which the Vincent Graham caught. However, the force would begin pulling both in as the Dagonet was being dragged across the ground, but both Bradfords came in from both sides and grappled around the Dagonet along with the Aglovale, who also fired its Harkins, which got tangled around the Vincent Graham. But even with all 4 nightmares working to pull the other one back, it only seemed to slow down the vacuum force as Devastator's Vortex Grinder continued to work. Tink, on the other hand, got a good look at the inner workings of the horrible machine, even at the distance he was at. Wizard, I have an idea. Tink contacted the only remaining unit available. I'll fire my Mega Hadron launcher right into that monster's weapon, but you try and sever its right arm to free Maribel and Orpheus. Understood. We'll fire both at the same time, just don't get in too close. Wizard agreed. Roger. Tink flew his Zetland as close as he could get to Devastator, who turned to notice his presence just as the Zetland began to configure and form its main weapon. Its shoulder units quickly began to unfold and merge with its arms, as the arms themselves combined together into a single, massive cannon that seemed almost as long as the Zetland itself. At the same time, Wizard's Agravain aimed its Hadron cannons at Devastator's right joint. Uldren, Maribel, get ready to fly, he warned the trapped pair as Devastator strengthened his grip, partially crushing both nightmares. Soundwave however quickly noticed what was happening as he saw the Zetland's cannon being charged and measured the energy output. He then contacted Devastator directly and gave the command to disperse immediately. Oh scrap. Devastator heard Soundwave's warning and quickly deactivated his Vortex Grinder, closing his plate just as Tink fired. Eat this. The Zetland's Mega Hadron launcher opened fire, blasting a Hadron blast that was almost 3 times its normal size, and quickly drained most of the Zetland's power supply. While Wizard, simultaneously, fired the Agravain's Hadron cannons at Devastator's left joint. Boom! Asterisk. Both attacks struck, the larger explosion hitting Devastator in his chest, while a smaller one blasted off Devastator's entire left arm, which quickly transformed into Hook, and freeing the Lancelot Grail and Byakuin. As Devastator began to tumble backwards from the resulting blast, Orpheus activated the Barley functioning glide system in his Byakuin, pushing the Grail toward the ground and a bit away as both he and Maribel made it to safety, though both their nightmares were heavily damaged from Devastator's crushing grip as well as the impact onto the ground. He did it, Wizard breathed in relief, knowing his nephew and Maribel were safe. But their victory was short-lived. Devastator was forced to disperse as the legs converted back into Long Haul and Scrapper, resulting in Scavenger and Mixmaster falling to the ground. But, Bonecrusher, still in the form of Devastator's drill arm, had launched almost like a makeshift missile, straight for the Zetland. Tink had no time to react as the drill shattered his nightmare, him inside, ending his life in that one instant as Bonecrusher transformed back and fell to the ground hard, all the Constructicons forcibly knocked unconscious. Tink! Maribel screamed as everyone in Sigma team gasped in horror. Uldren, Makira, and Sokia were already brought to tears, as even Leonhardt began to choke up. Jean and Orpheus looked in just as much shock as their eyes shook, while Ashley glared in rage, being reminded of Joanne, as well as half of his team that died in Slonim. "You metal bastards!" he exclaimed at the downed Constructicons as he, Uldren, Sokia, Leonhardt, and Makira, and even Jean, looked ready to end them right then and there. "You're gonna pay for." Leonhardt was cut off as a massive sonic blast was unleashed upon them from behind. The culprit was none other than Soundwave, aiming his resonance blaster and firing a massive surge of sonic waves at maximum range with maximum power. All 6 of them screamed as they felt the intense ringing in their ears. The force of the sonic blasts was enough to not only knock down each of their nightmares, but even cause their internal systems to fritz out of control. "No! Stay away from them!" Maribel watched helplessly as one by one, all 6 of the nightmares of Sigma team were rendered inoperable, causing them to topple over. "Soundwave!" Wizard roared as he shot his Agravain at the silent Decepticon, drawing both its MVS blades to swing down at Soundwave, who quickly jumped back to avoid the slash. Wizard was about to move in again, but Soundwave fired the resonance blaster once more with a more focused blast at the Agravain, sending it crashing into boulders. Soundwave kept his weapon focused on the Soul Nightmare, causing its chest unit to crack under the pressure. Even inside his unit, Wizard himself could not only hear the screeching noise, but also felt the external pressure, so much so that his mask began to crack. Back on Horai Island, Nina finished typing the last of the coding on her personal tablet before contacting her Autobot partner. "Ratchet, the virus is coded. I'm uploading it to you now." With one button press, she began to wirelessly upload the virus to Ratchet's scanner on the other side of the planet. Looking at his scanner, Ratchet could see that he was indeed receiving the virus from Nina. He then looked towards Toto, who stood directly in front of Laserbeak. She nodded to him and he nodded back as he pressed the command to bring Laserbeak's systems back online and begin uploading the virus. Already, Laserbeak's wings began to flap, forcing Ratchet to hold it down and keep it steady. Not to prevent Laserbeak from flying away due to the damage it sustained but allowing Toto direct eye to optic contact as her Geass sigil appeared in her left eye. "You will forget my face, as well as the Autobot named Ratchet. You did not see us on this mission," she said as the Geass sigil flew from her left eye and into Laserbeak's optics. There was a brief flash of red as the optics turned back to normal. Toto couldn't explain it, but she knew that Laserbeak had been affected by her Geass and Soundwave would be as well once he reunited with his mini-con. Orpheus had already pulled himself out of his nightmare, helping Maribel to do the same. The sound of a ground bridge portal opening drew their attention as they saw the unconscious Constructicons get pulled away by a vortex before it closed. Less than a second later, Soundwave appeared over them and aimed the resonance blaster at the pair. "Do your worst, Con." Orpheus glared along with Maribel. However, before any execution was made, Soundwave's visor lit up, showing a familiar signal reached the silent Decepticon. It was Laserbeak's signal. He then turned into a specific direction before transforming and flying away. Maribel and Orpheus could only look to one another in worry, knowing exactly what that meant. "Nina, what is our progress?" Ratchet asked as he continued to hold down Laserbeak, with Toto staying close to him. "Just more than 50%. She answered. "Toto. Ratchet. Come in now." They both heard Maribel's call, and by the sound of her voice, it wasn't good. "Maribel, I read you. What is it?" Toto asked with concern, looking toward Ratchet who mirrored her expression. "Our whole team is down, and Soundwave is heading your way. You probably have 2 minutes, tops." She exclaimed worriedly. "Please tell me you got that virus in." It was true, Ratchet need only look in a certain direction, and even from the vast distance he was at, Soundwave was closing in fast. "Nina. We're almost there. 76% done. We need to hide. If Soundwave sees us." Toto was already beginning to panic. Not needing to be told twice, Ratchet picked up the struggling Laserbeak and moved back behind a boulder with Toto clinging as close to him as possible. But even with their hiding spot, the noise Laserbeak was making would give them away. Ratchet held up his scanner to see that the virus was almost completely uploaded. This was going to be close. Nina watched the loading bar on her screen closely. She saw it reach the end and turn red, signaling the upload was complete. It's done. Ratchet pressed the button on his scanner, finishing the upload before letting go of Laserbeak, closing the compartment that had the bomb hidden inside. Laserbeak hovered, banging against the ground as it moved away from the hiding Autobot and human operator, though a piece of it did break off. It bounced a bit closer to the remains of the Granberry before coming to a stop, almost like it was out of power. Soundwave had just arrived, transforming mid-air before landing on the ground. Ratchet quickly hid behind the same boulder as he motioned for Toto to be quiet, bringing his finger to his mouth. She then clasped both her hands over her own mouth to be as quiet as possible. The silent and dangerous Decepticon walked closer to what was left of the Granberry, scanning it for any activity. Then suddenly aimed the resonance blaster in the direction of the boulder where Ratchet and Toto remained hidden behind. The medic gently held his hands in her direction as the girl was already sweating and shaking with fear, keeping herself from making so much as a peep. Soundwave then spotted the downed Laserbeak. He walked over toward his mini-con, and closer to the hiding pair. He picked up his damaged mini-con and re-merged it with his chest. The second Laserbeak made contact. Toto's Geass command had transferred directly into Soundwave without him even noticing. In that one instant before he even knew what had happened, any visual memory of Ratchet or Toto from this mission had been erased and he would never even notice. Soundwave then proceeded to walk away. Ratchet glanced from his hiding spot and looked towards Toto with a slight nod, causing her to breathe in relief. However, it seemed that sound had caught Soundwave's attention as he turned back in that direction. He scanned for any further sounds before extending his tentacles, which slithered across the ground like a pair of snakes and close to that very boulder, curving and coming around from both sides. Ratchet noticed the one on his right, quickly raising his hand to keep it from being detected. Toto noticed the one coming from the left and above, causing her to clasp her hands over her mouth again as she scooted back against the boulder as the tentacle lowered itself past her and Ratchet. The medic heard a small cling of metal, noticing the piece of Laserbeak's wing that broke off bounced up slightly. He raised his left foot as the right tentacle came in to collect it, causing both tentacles to retreat back to Soundwave, who put the piece into himself before transforming and flying away. "He's gone," Ratchet said. Toto fell on her hands and knees, letting out several breaths in relief. "Oh my god, that was terrifying. Soundwave has taken the bait," Ratchet said before transforming into his ambulance mode and opened his driver door. "Get in. We need to get to the rest of the team." "Right." Toto got inside, allowing Ratchet to drive away at top speed. The Nemesis. After returning to the warship, Soundwave had reconvened with Megatron, as well as the recently returned Starscream, Onslaught, Steeljaw, and Schneisel, and had showed his master his prize. "Ah, the resonance blaster." Megatron looked upon the weapon he held with a grin. "Crafted by Decepticon scientists according to your specifications, for maximum sonic devastation. You have performed admirably, Soundwave." He then turned to look at the rest of his subordinates. "Which is more than I can say for Steeljaw and Schneisel, both of whom were somehow able to lose relics of the primes to the enemy. Our humblest apologies, Lord Megatron." Steeljaw bowed apologetically as Schneisel performed a similar action. "There is no excuse to give. I failed, simple as that," the former Britannian prince said. "I happened to retrieve the Apex armor, Master," Starscream boasted, "and that should more than bolster our already great power. That depends on how it's used, or rather who uses it." Megatron cast a glare towards Starscream, who only looked down with a slight growl, briefly making eye contact with Schneisel. "Our mission wasn't as successful as he had hoped," Onslaught said. "The amount of red energon we've recovered is barely enough for one dose as it is. Shockwave may find some use for it, but I doubt even he could reverse engineer enough to fuel our army." "Perhaps not, but I am certain Shockwave will put it to the best use he can," Megatron replied. "And he himself has returned with a rather grand prize himself, his hunt being a complete success. And 2 more decrypted coordinates remain in play, and I have every confidence that Knockout and my nemesis will." The door to the bridge suddenly opened, catching all their attention as they saw that it was none other than Knockout himself, his entire paint job still a complete and scarred mess, and he was still fuming over it. Can you believe what those Black Knight brats did to me? The Decepticon scientist exclaimed, but Megatron was far from interested as he loomed over him. Did you retrieve the relic? No, Master. Knockout reported reluctantly. Then I suggest you convince me of your continued usefulness by examining Laserbeak, Doctor. Megatron told him. The sun had set on the mountain range as darkness filled the sky with the whole of Sigma team pulling themselves out of their disabled nightmares. Maribel already helping Ashley out as Aldrin had already got out before pulling out Sokia and Jean, with Leonhardt doing the same with Makira. Orpheus had gone over to the Agravain to see if he could help Wizard. Ratchet's ambulance form had just arrived on the scene. Toto got out before Ratchet transformed as both went to see if they could help the group. Maribel, everyone, Ratchet addressed them. Nightmares are disabled, but still intact, mostly. Maribel reported. What did this? Ratchet asked. Some kind of sonic weapon, way more powerful than anything we've seen. Aldrin answered. Yeah, probably not some kind of ancient magic relic made by alien robot Jesus or whatever. Ashley cleaned his ears out. My ears are still ringing. Toto noticed someone from their group was missing. Where's Tink? The former Glinda Knights looked down in sorrow. It didn't take long for Toto figure out what happened, along with Ratchet. I'm sorry. Jean apologized. She didn't know the man as well as the others did, but that didn't mean she wouldn't mourn him. Toto was already in tears as Aldrin ran up to hug her childhood friend, crying herself. Even Ratchet closed his eyes in remorse. Please tell me that virus worked. Maribel hopped. Soundwave took the bait. Ratchet confirmed. But we won't know if the virus itself is successful until Soundwave accesses the Yakin database. He didn't reveal Toto's Geass, something she silently appreciated. The group then looked over to the Agravain as it finally opened up and Orpheus helped out the masked man. Hang on Wizard, you'll be alright. He told him. Orpheus, I. However, it was only then that Orpheus saw that the wizard's mask was cracked, and the cracks had spread up and down until the mask itself broke in half. Both pieces fell to the ground as Orpheus, Maribel, Aldrin, Ratchet, Jean, Ashley, Leondart, Makira, Sokia, and Toto all saw the face of Oegros Zevon. The Nemesis. Megatron was in the ship's laboratory, overseeing Knockout's examination of Laserbeak as Soundwave laid on the examination table. Given Laserbeak was the mini-con that sustained the most damage from Soundwave's report of the mission, it only made sense for it to be looked at. Knockout held his scanner over Soundwave's chest, but he found an odd reading that only caused him to look in confusion. What is it? Megatron asked. An obstruction of some sort. Knockout replied, sounding a bit curious himself. Soundwave then stood up from the table, detached Laserbeak from his chest and into his hands, opened the compartment to reveal the makeshift bomb inside. It's a bomb. Knockout shouted in a panic as he ran to the corner of the room, threw himself to the floor and held his hands over his head just waiting for it to explode. Ah, that is clever. Megatron said in a tone that mixed impression and annoyance before addressing his cowardly scientist. Knockout, prepare to properly dispose of the obstruction. Seeing how he had no choice in the matter, Knockout took the bomb in his hands and ran out into the ship's hallways as fast as he could, while also taking care not to drop the explosive in his hands. Right after he left, Soundwave put Laserbeak back as Megatron spoke to him. Soundwave, if we are to maintain any advantage over the Autobots and Black Knights, Megatron was briefly interrupted by the muffled sound of an explosion from a short distance, accompanied by a scream from Knockout that sounded akin to a cartoon character. He paid it little more than a curious gaze before getting back on topic. Decoding the remainder of the Yakin database must remain your top priority. Soundwave nodded in understanding. Orpheus backed away as he saw the face of his uncle, the face that all had now come to see. Wizard, the masked man who led the anti-Britannian network known as Peace Mark was in reality, Oegros Zevon, head of the Britannian noble Zevon family. The Glinda Knights each had their own expressions of shock as they recognized this man, even if it was the first time they've met him or not. Ratchet winced, fearing this would happen. He was among the few individuals who knew Wizard's true identity. Who the hell is that? Ashley asked bluntly, not recognizing the man. You idiot, that's Oegros Zevon. Jean scolded him. He's the head of the Zevon family. Or rather, he was given that Britannia's gone now. I never paid much attention to all that stuff. Ashley shrugged nonchalantly. But for Uldren and Orpheus, it was a completely different story. Uldren remembered it all. She remembered her mother, Olivia, dueling with her uncle. Swords clashed fiercely as brother and sister sought to end each other's lives, something the young Uldren couldn't understand at all. Even as he cut her down and ended the life of her beloved mother. Stay on guard, Oegros, my death is not the end of your journey, but the beginning. My life has been wandering in the wasteland. Uncle Oegros, why? The anger and hate Uldren had for her uncle had never once left her body. It was the main reason she left her family to join the military, something Maribel knew as well and hated the man for it, even more so as Charles never did anything about it even though Olivia was a knight of the round. However, that anger and hate was felt twofold for Orpheus. He himself recognized that face. The face of the same man, dressed in black, who led a squad of nightmares into the village that took him in as well as his beloved Yulia, only for that man to burn it all to the ground and kill her right in front of him. Do you hate me, boy? If you do, come and kill me. If you can. All those around me have a technique and talent beyond standards. We are Britannia's special forces. We are Pluton. If you are afraid, give up the fight. And devote yourself to an ordinary life. And as it turns out, the man he swore to kill and avenge Yulia, the man he hated more than anything, was also the same man whom he had respected and gave him purpose once again. Wizard was Oegros. Before he knew it, Orpheus was seeing red as he gave a roar and punched his uncle across the face so hard, blood sprayed from his mouth as he was knocked down. He would have beaten him even further but Ashley quickly came up to hold him back. Hey, take it easy, man. Ashley struggled to hold the raging Orpheus back. You killed her, Orpheus shouted to the recovering Oegros, who could only look down in shame. You killed her. You killed Yulia. You and your precious Pluton. Both Maribel's and Toto's eyes widened more than everyone else here. He was a part of Pluton. She truly had no idea about that. But then again, the children born and raised in the Geass order shared no interaction with Pluton unless Vivi permitted it, and she had not received said permission. He was the one who killed Yulia. Maribel remembered Orpheus telling her back in Castle Weisswolf the fate of her sister and how she was killed by Pluton from the Geass order. And as it turns out, the man who caused her beloved Uldren so much pain was also the same man who took her sister away permanently. She too, along with Uldren, were about to rush and beat Oegros to a pulp, perhaps even to death, but Leonhardt, Makira, Sokia, Jean, and even Toto all tried to hold them back as well. Oz. Mary. Don't. Sokia exclaimed. It's not worth it. Makira shouted. He killed my mother. Our mother. Uldren screamed out. Mary's sister. That's enough. All of you. Ratchet stomped his foot on the ground, halting everything as all eyes set on him. Listen, you all have every reason to despise him, some more so than others, but this is neither the time nor the place for it. Especially so soon after the fate of your comrade. Being reminded of Tink's death did bring the former Glinda Knights to a sorrowful calm, allowing them to release Maribel and Uldren, gazing at one another with sad expressions that also mixed with glares as they once again looked toward Oegros as he pulled himself up and wiped the blood from his mouth. Orpheus looked ready to rip him limb from limb like a rabid animal, but Ashley still held him back. Look man, I get it. Trust me, I do. Ashley told him. But you gotta cool it. We don't even know what the hell's going on with this guy. Orpheus stopped struggling, but his rage hadn't left his body, even as Ashley let him go. He then turned toward Ratchet with an accusatory look in his eyes. You knew. The Autobot gave a single nod in confirmation. Who else knows? Optimus, Zero, Sarah, and only our most inner circle companions. Ratchet explained, which also consisted of Bumblebee, Kagaya, Toto, Ogi, Colin, RC, Bulkhead, Rye, and Ironhide. Somehow that didn't surprise Orpheus, or even Uldren and Maribel. Look, Oegros finally spoke up, looking at all of them with an expression of grief and regret. The things I've done, I won't make any excuses, nor will I ask forgiveness. But, I do plan to give you an explanation, at least understand why I did it. Just not here. Once we get back, and see if that virus worked, I'll tell you everything. And then, you can hate me as much as you want and decide what to do with me afterwards. Orpheus glanced back to his twin sister, who mirrored his angered expression as well as Maribel. The three seemed to come to a silent agreement. Fine, Orpheus accepted. But you are not sneaking your way out of this. If you try, we will hunt you down and end your pitiful life. Uldren declared. And even if we hear everything, that does not guarantee your life will be spared. Maribel scowled. I understand. Oegros nodded. Maribel turned toward her knights, with Makira and Lenhart nodding to each other as they went over to Oegros and stood close to him. They wouldn't restrain him, but they'd be keeping an eye on him to make sure he didn't try anything. Ratchet then accessed his comms. This is Sigma Team, we need a ground bridge to our current coordinates. Be certain to send a retrieval team to recover the nightmares as well, they need extensive repairs. A ground bridge portal quickly opened for the team as they all entered, leaving the Alps behind. Back on the Nemesis, Soundwave immediately followed his master's orders and got to work on decoding the remainder of the Yakan database. His tentacles attached themselves to the console as he began to type, accessing the Decepticon network and Nemesis mainframe, beginning his work. Unbeknownst to him, now that he was directly connected to the mainframe, the implanted virus automatically uploaded itself into the mainframe connection to the network and searched for anything related to the Yakan relics, including information on relics already obtained, and began to wirelessly copy and transfer all that data and information to where the virus originated from. As Team Sigma exited the ground bridge portal at Horai Island's outside perimeter, a Black Knight retrieval team, headed by Ganabati, entered the very same portal right after them in the form of several large trucks in order to retrieve all the damaged nightmares back at the Alps. Ratchet, everyone. They all saw Nina running up to them with an excited look on her face. Look. She pulled out her personal tablet and typed in a few key commands to project a holographic display of Cybertronian script that Ratchet recognized immediately. The Yakan database. He looked in awe and surprise, along with everyone else. The virus worked, Nina said enthusiastically. The database and everything on the Yakan relics are downloading into Horai Island's mainframe as we speak. Ratchet gave a triumphant laugh. Nina Einstein, you never cease to surprise me. The girl looked away with a blush and bashful smile. She was immediately pulled into an affectionate headlock by Ashley and given a noogie. Come here, you little genius. The redhead ruffled her hair, causing her to laugh as she tried to push him off, but Jean was able to pull them apart, but she couldn't help but smile. The rest of Sigma Team couldn't help but smile with each other. Tink's sacrifice wasn't in vain. They may have failed to retrieve this relic, but they might just have gained the means to get all the others, including all those the Decepticons have retrieved. Makira leapt into Leonhardt's arms as he twirled her around, both laughing. Maribel and Uldren smiled to one another emotionally as they held each other's hands. Sokia of course interrupted their tender moment as she pulled them in close, but they still smiled, nonetheless. Uldren then glanced to her brother, Orpheus, who merely smiled as he nodded toward her. Even Oegros smiled at their success. He knew he still had a lot to answer for and would be on the receiving end of such anger and hate, as he so deserved, but he was still happy that they were happy, and that Tink's death truly wasn't for nothing. He then turned in surprise to see Toto smiling at him, looking toward him with genuine assurance, causing him to return the smile as well. Oh, believe me, Soundwave will provide the coordinates to the remaining relics. Megatron said to Starscream and Schneisel as they walked away to let Soundwave work undisturbed. Yes, we are most fortunate to have him on our side, Lord Megatron. Schneisel said. I can't imagine the damage he would inflict upon us if here an Autobot. Perhaps you would do well to take a cue from him yourself once in a while, Starscream. Megatron told his second-in-command. Primarily how to stay silent and achieve results. Just one triumph out of 100 failures on average does not mean you've earned my favor. He said before walking away. Once he was out of earshot, Starscream gave a growl before he slammed his fist into the nearest wall. I did achieve results, today. I've brought our forces the most durable armor in Cybertronian history, and this is the thanks I get. You need only endure it only a little while longer, my friend. Schneisel told him with a sinister grin. After all, his reign is about to come to a just and swift end. Very soon. Another ground bridge portal opened on Horai Island, causing Ratchet and the rest of Sigma Team, as well as Nina, to look in surprise. One of the others' teams is back? Uldren asked. Nina looked at her data pad to get a reading. It seems to be the Omega team retuning. I can't wait to share the news. Ratchet said excitedly. However, Maribel looked behind in surprise to see Euphemia and Diethard both running toward them as fast as they can. The pink-haired princess had a look of worry on her face. Euphi, what is? They need help. Euphemia screamed. Get them help. Now. Before anyone could ask what she meant, Orpheus noticed something coming out of the groundbridge vortex, and coming in fast. Duck and cover. They all moved out of the way just in time as several large objects fell out of the portal, which shut behind them, and crashed onto the ground. It was Omega Team, or rather, what was left of them. Bulkhead laid on his front, a large gaping hole in the back. Wheeljack was on his side, his right arm torn off. Ironhide was covered in steam and drops of lava, holding a critically injured Chromia close. Warpath landed on his back, his central cannon ripped clean out from his chest which was gushing energon. The only two nightmares were the Raiden and Galatian. The later had its entire lower half missing as Nonette climbed out of the cockpit, blood falling down from the side of her face. The Raiden appeared to be in even worse shape, despite being in one piece. It was covered in a sickly green-like substance, some of which appeared to be corroding or even partially melting away at the outer armor. But what stood out was a large slice into its central chest area, as though it had been stabbed by something. The cockpit opened to reveal Tamaki trying to pull out the horribly injured pilot. Hey, get this kid a doctor. Now, Tamaki shouted as he pulled out Rai. The kid was covered in blood, his left arm horribly mangled and twisted beyond words. No, Ratchet looked in horror, just as everyone else. And this at the end of Season 2 Part 12 of this What If. Hope you guys like it. Do not forget to leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel.